We have so many things to cover tonight, but I think first and foremost, we have a new face at the town manager desk. John Burt, I'd like to introduce you as our new town manager. I think people have read he comes from Michigan and had a very robust background that fit perfectly for Groton. And so this is the first night of, I'm sure as Mark can attest, many. And wish you the best of luck. And along with your arrival is Mark's. I think this is your last town council meeting, which you're probably broken up about.
Unless he's at the podium.
Right, that's right. You could be at the podium as in future meetings, holding us. So.
Looking forward to it.
30 seconds for him.
I think we'd all be remiss if we didn't thank you very much for your commitment, your passion for the town as a citizen as well, and the probably sleepless nights you've had in the past. Hopefully, more soothing nights coming forward, and everything you've done. You've been, I think, a 35-year employee, 15 years as town manager. Seen the town go through a lot, and I'm not sure it can be put into words. How grateful we are for your service to the town.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll figure it out within a couple of weeks now. So, thanks. So we'll try to make this one a quick one,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So, are there any calendar or communications? I just wanted to bring up, I received an email from somebody who worked in emergency communications who had said that they were down a person because we cut the budget. And I went back and looked that we gave them 1.1% more this year than we did for last year's budget, but the number that you had requested, Mark, was, I think we've reduced it by about $40,000. So I'm not sure if you're aware, or they were alluding to the fact that there were issues in the fact that they were short-staffed.
Where to begin? Well, there was a vacancy.
Okay.
So I've had a couple of discussions with Joe Sastry, and the recommendation and decision was not to fill that position. As some of you may recall, Joe, or the discussion, it's really the second year in a row, the discussion has been, we're going to try to move some things around. We may start looking at bringing on part-time folks, which we used to do many years ago, but for training and for other reasons, we got away from that. I forget the dollar amount increase over last year, but there are salary increases and so forth, and we've been, over the last couple of years, really not fully funding our replacement needs or repair needs. C.O.W. comes along, or Eversource comes along and says they're going to reset a line of poles. Some of those wires on those poles are ours. We have to pay for. We don't get any advance notification for budgetary purposes. It's not what we really want to do, but we don't have the resources to bring on a full-time position for the full year. It's going to be John's issue, but I'm a little hesitant when the council and or the RTM cuts a dollar amount and there's a discussion on a position, to bring somebody on full-time halfway through the year, because what that means is the next year. So I'm sure Joe, will get with John. Joe's been out, and in fact, you haven't met with Joe Sastry at this point. I'm sure that will be an item that he will brief the new manager on.
All right, thank you. Bonnie?
I just want to say we had a fun time marching in the parade.
Yes.
Councilor Antipas, Morton, Barber, and the mayor, and I, and Harry. And the town was very happy that the route was extended. They made that pretty obvious to us. And I have communications from the Economic Development Commission. We met last Thursday, and there's a vacancy. So if anybody in town is a businessman or woman who would like to be on the EDC, we're looking for people.
Great.
And
Right.
Just to pick up on the parade, so it doesn't get lost. I mean, the route it did go back to the old route. It kind of accidentally went back to the old route. I was at a department head, we had a department head meeting a couple weeks ago, or around a month ago, and we're going around the table, and Mark Berry announces, you know, the parade, and it's the shortened route. And I said to Mark, geez, Mark, that's not what I've been led to believe, nor do I believe that's what the council. And I was a little frantic, but I did find an email that got sent out to the council and myself and 20 or 30 or 40 other groups saying it's starting at Pequannock Plains. That was a mistake. So the only reason I'm mentioning, you know, it was at that point, you may recall, we had a couple of ladies visit us a couple months ago, and one of the items that got raised was the shortened route and how that was unfair to folks who live in Pequannock Bridge and so forth and so on. And I think when that discussion took place that evening, my sense was the council, you know, was at least thinking that, whew, thank God we're going back to the old route, because you would all receive that letter in your packet. That was a mistake, and I am only raising it now so that discussions can take place with Parks and Rec and other staff early on concerning next year's parade. The chief is here and can talk to the costs associated with having the appropriate number of police officers out on the route. I will say, from the vantage point that I had, I'm usually downtown watching the parade and have never marched in it or anything like that. There are a fair number of people between the entry point from Pequannock Plains past Town Hall, and there's a direct correlation to where there's a tree and where people stand.
And I have to say, many people yelled out to us when we marched by, thank you for giving our parade back to us in that area.
So I'm just mentioning it now, that just so you had the kind of the backstory on it, and it is a discussion. You know, I would suggest you try to have that discussion no later than this fall, so that the police and Parks and Rec and Public Works and others involved, you know, can plan accordingly.
Just one last note about the parade. We did carry a banner this year for the first time, and the banner was painted by students at Fitch High School. So there were 3 students at Fitch, I don't have their names in front of me, who painted the banner for us, and they were led by Christina Scala, who's an art teacher at the school. So several people in the parade route yelled, hope that wasn't with our taxpayer money, and thankfully it was not. So anyway, would anybody like to move the minutes for
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8-0 to 0. Is there any unfinished business? Anybody? We'll move on to 2017-0175, Police Support Specialist Job Description. Imagine Chief, you're going to come up? Bob, you coming up too? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor.
You want to go ahead and...
Currently, we haven't filled the records position over at the police station. And the reason we haven't done that is we've added quite a few responsibilities onto this, which were through necessity. And having positions as Office Assistant 2 just didn't fit the bill. It's kind of a generic position, Office Assistant 2, through the whole town, and basically, we felt this didn't fit it. So originally, we had like 3 clerks, and they were unable to keep up with the demand. This would include record keeping for not only criminal activities, their criminal reports, data used in profiling reports, which is becoming a huge piece of labor-intensive work, the use of the taser force, state mandated reports, toxicology, total quality management, how we do ourselves there in the report, Incident reports, troubleshooting the computer. There's gonna come to be a lot of FOI reporting because the body cams and the dash cams will, every time we have some kind of police action, we feel that'll increase how many times we'll have some kind of FOI request. So one of the things we're really trying to do here is get someone in this position that will be able to upgrade our technology, help get in pace with it, and make us more efficient. This person will also be able to troubleshoot the computer when there's issues with that too. They know enough how to redact, you know, what they should have in the report, what they shouldn't. They should be able to scrub reports, and basically I'll turn it over to the chief.
Since shortly after I came on board with the town manager, Mark and I have discussed this. There is an increasing need for technology within law enforcement based on a lot of the things that we're doing. I think some of the conversations centered around potentially having someone provide that support directly to us as a member of the department. What we're looking for here is not a new position per se. It's a repurposing of an existing position that hasn't been filled through budget reductions in the last 2 years. Trying to manage that against the full-time sworn force can be difficult, but what we've had to do is utilize people in different capacities. For instance, the person that's overseeing our records division right now is a sergeant that has additional duties. This is not the primary duty. The last person that held that was a sergeant that retired last year. So during this time, we've really had people doing additional jobs, and what this is looking at doing is taking a bunch of things, putting it on one umbrella. As Bob said, we have an increased number of requirements at the state level for data that we have to provide. Some of it's racial profiling, some of it's the regular reports and record stuff, motor vehicle accidents, crime statistics. We get an exceptional number of pistol permit requests a year. I think a lot of that is due to the transient population that comes in to serve with the United States Navy. They come in for a few years, they apply for a pistol permit. That's an extremely labor-intensive duty. Requires a background investigation. There's certain requirements we have to fulfill at the state level and wait for some reports coming back. That right now is a bit disjointed because I'm having that duty shared among several people. So what we're looking at doing is taking a position that we've had for a long time that really was vacated a year and a half ago when a promotion was made of a clerk that became the chief secretary. The position she vacated has remained vacant. So what we're looking to do is make this a more global position in the sense that they're going to be handling a lot of duties, and we're looking for your consent to allow that to be changed.
Dean?
So the vacant position is a level 4 in terms of pay, right?
This is level 7.
I'm looking under offices, and I might have it, might have screwed
No,
up.
it was, previously was an OA2. This is non-union, actually.
No, what I'm saying is
So it's
yeah,
a level 7.
right. So the presentation is that this isn't a new position, it's a repurposing of an old position that's been vacant, I think you said, for a year and a half. Is
Correct.
that in the materials that we have, is that the OA2 level 4?
Correct.
Am I looking at that? So that position is vacant. This new position would be salary level 7. So, not a new position, but I imagine different salary. Can you give me an idea what the difference would be between the vacant salary and the salary for the new position?
This person would inherit some supervisory duties. We've had a police supervisor do that in the past. So they, I believe we would need to increase that. But it also called to mind, we do have supervisory positions right now that we have not filled.
Right.
And so a lot of those some of those duties would go over to this person.
Well, that would be the second part of my question. The first one had to do with the actual quantitative aspect of this proposal. And the second would be, well, of course, if they're doing more than typically one would expect, greater salary. But I needed to know just how much of a salary jump that is from level 4 to level 7, even if it doesn't involve more duties.
I'm not sure the dollar figures off the top of my head. I don't know if you have those with you, but we were discussing this earlier today. In fact, to recruit for this position, to get all the things that we want, that salary 7 range may actually not be quite as attractive as others might be for this type of position. So we've kind of war gamed it a little bit, tried to figure out where it should fit. I don't know the dollar figures, but they were in roughly the same ballpark, not a huge difference between.
Between 4 and 7?
One's with the,
Or between-
one's a contract
Right.
position under GMEA, the other,
Yep.
the position as we're proposing it here would be non-union.
Right,
Again, they're gonna inherit supervisory duties and some other tasks.
understood, but I just need to get an idea of the ballpark. That's all.
Rich?
Yeah, Chief, it seems like there's a lot of responsibility that you're giving this one person. I know in the past, the sergeant, I knew the sergeant, and he handled this work, and he had support. This person is, the way it reads, is an individual that won't have the support that the sergeant had.
They do, there's still two clerks in the records division. There was formerly 3, so this, and a supervisor. So there's not as much staffing as there was, a number of years ago. We still have vacancies, 2 vacancies right now at the lieutenant level. So that's why I want to get the right skill sets and the right person in for this job, because we are asking a lot out of them.
Okay, thank you.
Diane, I'm sorry.
He missed me, we've been off a couple weeks. Can you tell me, do you have the money in this year's budget to hire this person?
We unfortunately lost an officer not that long ago, and we did experience a retirement of a lieutenant, so I'm hoping that if we do this within the next several months, that by the end of the year, we'll be able to cover it.
Mark, John, are you supportive of the position?
Well, it's probably unfair for John at this point, but absolutely, as the chief noted, this was a discussion he and I had fairly early on in his tenure, not only for this position, but, for a number of other positions. The thought that there are some positions in the department where historically they've been filled with police officers that have varying skills, be it IT or whatever, and generally, they're only there, they're there for a relatively short period of time. And the thought was, do these positions really need to be filled with a police officer as opposed to a civilian that has experience working with police or in a police station or emergency services environment? So opportunity is presenting itself. I certainly commend the chief for taking this opportunity and running with it. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do in the records division.
Thank you. Karen?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we accept and approve the job description for the police support specialist. I think if we're going to keep looking at cutting the police department budget, I think we're going to force this type of situation, because what the chief is facing is having to figure out a way to transfer duties from the uniformed personnel to civilian employees. And I mean, this is a perfect example. So I think, if you're gonna cut the budget, then we really have no choice but to approve this kind of position.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8 to 0 to 0. Thanks, Chief.
Can I ask you something before
Sure.
you leave? What's the status of the body cams?
We have them, they're all on hand, we've got them. Actually, before the meeting, I was talking briefly with Councilor Mrazek. There's training that goes into it. My hope is to have them fully employed by September 1st. We're waiting train the trainer stuff from TASER, from Axum to come in, provide our the lead people that we have on this to get that training they need, and then to roll out the policy to the whole department, as well as doing some on-hand training so that they're all fully versed in it. I don't want to do it haphazardly. I want to do it deliberately. As you might imagine, with a change like this, there's a little bit of question and answer that needs to take place.
I don't know if you saw the video, though, I saw it today, of a girl that was passed out in a car. It's gone viral, and there's 3 girls, and long story short, the police came up and questioned her, and she, when she got home, put on Facebook that she was sexually assaulted, and the body cam that was released told a different story, and I thought of you, thinking a lawsuit was alleviated because of it, so.
Yeah, we had a discussion with many officers on Friday afternoon, and that was part of it. I do, as I said before to this body, that I believe it's, not only is it the way things are going in the future, but I think it protects our officers, it protects the department, it protects the town.
So what's your target date that you're gonna be up and
We're
running?
hoping to have it in, and it's based on our vendor as far as getting them in to provide the training that we need. I'm hoping to have them out in the field by the 1st. We have had some out in the field already. We did a testing and evaluation, but before we put it out to all of the officers, I want to make sure they know how to use it. They know what the policy says. They know what their expectations are, and they know how to use the equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Bonnie?
I just wanted to put a plug in. The chief was in the newspaper today, and there's a fundraiser Thursday at the
Jonathan Edwards Winery.
Jonathan Edwards Winery. It's $12, and it's to raise money for fallen police families,
Yes, for
right?
the Tour de Force. It's a, thank you for mentioning that. I'm doing a bike ride from Boston to New York over the September 11th weekend, just to raise money for the families of fallen officers. And,
Nice.
Good cause.
Thanks, Chief.
pray for my legs that they hold up. If you're watching the Tour de France
that's a
lately, it's
long
a
ride.
couple of
Maybe you
crashes.
need to wear a body cam on that.
Maybe that's a good idea.
Or at least a GoPro.
Yeah.
Thank you.
2017-0176, Inspector 1 construction job description. Hi, John.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and either,
Okay. Initially, OPDS was conducting a search for a Building 2 inspector, and one of the problems we had out there was, in our search, we couldn't really satisfy ourselves with the available pool of candidates out there, and that forced us to, kind of change the way we were thinking. So what we're proposing is to change this to an entry-level position, which allows us to bring in trainable individuals who work under a supervisor and eventually be groomed into, well-rounded, experienced building inspectors.
I think a consistent theme you'll hear going forward is recruiting people is getting harder and harder to fill positions. And something that we've done already in one of our planning positions a couple of years back was, instead of filling the planner 2, filling the planner 1, training that individual so that they'll grow within the organization. We're looking to do the same thing here. Today, we do have an Inspector 1 position on the books, but it has more to do with just housing code. We were looking for a general Inspector Level 1, so we modeled it off of the existing Inspector 1 position. It's something that's already a position that is within our budget. It was approved as an Inspector 2. The Inspector 1 is a few $1,000s less per year as a position. There's already a salary classification within the contract for the Inspector 1 position. So we're looking to create this job description so that we can fill that position, which is much needed.
thank you. Any questions? Bonnie?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept and approve the job description for the
Second,
We have a motion-
Constructor Inspector 1.
A motion and a second. So as you said, just to make sure there's no additional money in the budget.
Correct.
It is an existing position that you're changing, and you're hoping to bring somebody in entry level who can grow in the position?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8 to 0 to 0.
Thank you.
Thanks. 2017-0177, Supervisor, Human Resources, Administration Job Description. Yeah. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Again?
I'm all alone.
is this your job?
I'm thinking about it. Basically, one of the problems I've been running into is when we first came upon the deliberations of the 2018 budget, we were looking for an additional person in our department to be the Occupational Safety and Health Coordinator. This was funded about $50,000. However, the position was cut drastically to the point where I couldn't hire anybody at that point, and what it's led me to do is restructure my department because I do need somebody in risk. So I'm going to take my human resources coordinator and move her into this, also take on these responsibilities. There would be a slight increase, probably about $5,000 or something like that, to take on these responsibilities. But when we're looking at paying insurance bills well over $1 million, I think that this would help us to be able to recapture a lot of these funds that, whether it's workers' comp, risk, motor vehicle, claims, claims as far as administrative claims, payments, et cetera. I think this would make a lot of sense. Where I would get the money is I've kind of set aside some money for risk, and with the money I've got with risk, I could easily absorb this. And my intent with having this person in that position, I believe, build some incentives to kind of get some people into looking at becoming more of a safety culture. That's what I've tried to get, and I think that there was probably a mistake cutting that money out of my budget, but it is the way it is. And if I can switch some of this person's responsibilities over to that position, I feel I can make some headway in our claims.
Bonnie?
Does this person need special training?
There will be some training, but luckily the person's been around quite a while in the Human Resources Department. It's a very quick study and probably one of the best human resources people I've probably seen in my career.
Huh.
Wow.
Second best.
That's great.
And you're the first?
Next to you.
I don't want to say that.
Yeah, Bob, if I remember, you gave an outstanding discussion at the RTM meeting on this particular issue as far as getting somebody involved with the OSHA and so forth and the risk management. And it's unfortunately that it was cut down. And I kind of felt bad that happened because I don't think they realized the importance of this and the amount of money that could be saved the town. I have 30 years of experience in construction, and I know that safety is an important aspect, and it has to be everybody's job, and somebody has to be out there ensuring that it is being done. And I support this totally.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept and approve the job description for this new position. I think it's going to pay for itself in the long run. I think it was a mistake not to have funded the full position, and I think if you're going to do more with less, then this is the way to go.
Second. Yep.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? I think kind of what Rich was saying, there was a pretty, very active discussion during the RTM. For better or for worse, I think I give you credit for modifying a position because you feel so strongly about it to get it in there. But I think it's definitely a balancing of what our financial arm, the RTM, is saying. Although we don't have to, be interesting to find out, what they think about it, just because you are you're taking into consideration that they said no, but taking a current, an existing position and modifying it to do what you think is right. I agree with you. I think that safety is very, very important, and having a good program with regards to safety is beneficial and will save money ultimately in the town. So, but I think it's interesting, and I give you credit for staying with it.
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8-0.
Thank you.
Next is 2017-0172, adoption of ordinance to designate the Planning Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and to abolish the Zoning Commission. And we had a public hearing a few weeks ago where several people came and spoke. And this is to continue the discussion amongst the councilors, town managers, and and John, are you going to come up too, I guess, and Deb? So, I think where we left off at the public hearing was that there were several people who spoke, who had thoughts on the combining and the timing of, with regards to the zoning regs. And there was a person or two that spoke about supporting it. So, I don't know if you want to pick up the discussion and leave us a little bit, John, or?
We had prepared a memo for that last meeting, just kind of laying some things out, because we are in the process of updating, rewriting our zoning regulations, and I do think that although the market analysis had referenced combining the Planning and Zoning Commission, there will be delays in rewriting the regulations if that combination does happen, because now we're taking the workload of what is today 2 and putting it into 1. So one of the purposes of that, putting that memo together, was just to kind of set some clear expectations, because although there will be streamlining benefits of combining the Planning and Zoning Commission, there'll also be some delays in the regulatory piece of it. So there is different sides of looking at this.
Bonnie?
Yeah, I did get a call from Susan Dowling, who supports it this week, and doesn't want to delay too much, but I know there was a lot of discussion about the size of the commission, and there was some feedback at the public hearing to make it down to 5, and I wanted to know what you and Deb's thought on that was.
I think 5 is a better number, especially if you keep the 3 alternates. It's a manageable group. It will limit some discussion, make the applications move a bit
Moves a
faster.
little bit smoother. So if we want to change it from, it's 7 now, I think, to 5, do we have to get the attorney back in and redraft that?
I don't think so. I think that we can.
We just do it?
Because we left that, I
And
think that we could shrink it.
Yeah.
We could shrink it, but we can't increase it.
And I also think that I'd like to look at getting rid of both the commissions and starting a new commission, because there's people that are on the zoning commission that would be helpful with the zoning rewrite, and I would like the attorney, I know he gave us an opinion, but I don't really see why that's not possible.
Dean?
Mike Carey, I think, addressed that. I don't know when. Feels like some time ago because I've been gone.
It was before the public hearing.
Yeah, it was definitely before the public hearing. And I believe the basis for that was simply the wording of the statute. I've read the statute myself. I can see where he would come to that conclusion. Is it final and definitive? I can't say, but if you read the statute, it seems to direct us toward only being able to pick one of the existing bodies and adding on the functions, and then eliminating the other body, rather than creating a third new body and then collapsing the other two. It sounds like a formality, but that's how the statute's read.
So if we kept the planning commission as the standing body,
That was the idea,
That
right?
was the
that's
idea.
what we were gonna do. Can we start with new members?
That's a good question.
I didn't hear that.
Can we start with new members?
That's a good question. Yeah, having, because I would say that if you keep the body, you haven't created a new one. In other words, it's not like a corporate merger where the new entity just happens to adopt one of the names of the old entities. I think the planning commission, now planning and zoning, you've designated the planning commission as planning and zoning. You haven't created a new body, and therefore, I could argue that people who have seats on that body, even though it's not an entitlement, but people who hold that office would continue to hold that office. But that's just a one man's opinion.
And how many people are on the planning commission right now?
5 people with 3 alternates.
Okay.
I think, if I may finish, I think the better approach, of course, given the importance of this, is to ask people, okay, who's it? I mean, in the end, people can resign if they want to.
Right.
Who's really interested in serving on a P and Z? And that's how you're gonna get your personnel for the new body,
Okay.
Diane and then Karen?
for the old body.
Um, So the market analysis suggests that we do combined, and I'm told the surrounding towns have already done that. So I really believe it's time to move forward, and I do not want to delay. I want to get on this and I want to get it done. I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect time to do it. I think, if we wait 6 months, you're going to say, oh, but we got this. So you know what? Let's just rip that Band-Aid off and get it going, and let's do it.
Karen?
Yeah, John, have you surveyed the existing planning commission to find out? Because what I'm hearing via newspaper articles and certain individuals that were here was that they basically all intend to get up and walk out if this goes through. So it may be a case there may not be anyone still left on the commission. Do you know who's going to stay and who's not?
We haven't surveyed the members to see if any of them are going to resign. I know some of the existing members, a number of them were concerned about the increased workload. They were very concerned about that.
Rich?
Yeah, John, the zoning regulations are being rewritten right now. When are they gonna be completed? And will this new zoning and planning be established before they're completed? Or are you gonna wait until the existing zoning commission completes their task of rewriting the zoning regulations and then turning them over to the zoning and planning?
So we just received a first draft, a very rough draft of the rewrite. We have not given that to and there's still a lot of direction needed from us to the consultant. We have not given that document out at this point in time. It's probably going to take us a month or two to dig through that. I mean, these are substantial changes that we're talking about within these regulations. That's a process that is going to take probably at least another year before whichever body it goes through, assuming we're meeting a couple of times a month to go through that. So if we're now working with the Joint Planning and Zoning Commission, depending on the number of applications that are coming in, we want to have nights that are dedicated just to working on the regulations. So I guess the shorter answer is, if you adopt a new combined planning and zoning commission, we're not going to give the regulations to the existing zoning commission for them to spend a couple of months on, only for then the work that they do wouldn't really be applicable, because the members of the planning and zoning commission may have some different opinions.
Okay.
So right now we can work through it internally, and that's what we're continuing to do before we can give a better product to whichever board or commission ends up with this.
Greg?
So how long is this internal work through gonna take? I mean, is that gonna take long enough to where you could come up with a plan where we could go ahead and, have a combined planning and zoning such that that would be established by the time you guys were done?
Us working through a draft would then be us submitting a draft to the new or existing
Right.
commission a few months from now, and then going through that with them section by section. So that's going to take a period of time. So it depends on what you want to do. We can put a lot of internal work on these regulations, make a lot of forward progress, just looking at state laws, best practices, things that we've gotten, looking at the Plan of Conservation and Development, our POCD, the guidance that we have from that, as well as the feedback that we've gotten already from the Zoning Commission, and integrating that within the document. But really, the time frame is going to be different if it's working with just a Zoning Commission or a Planning and Zoning Commission.
Harry?
Yeah, I think in our memo, it also says if that's what we decided, the route we wanted to take, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, that's to go to the RTM too?
It does go to the RTM, and they,
Is that if they don't act, it happens?
Correct.
Just like a teacher's contract? I mean,
yeah.
so they have like a certain period of time to, thank you.
Bonnie and then
So I had a conversation with John about the timing of the zoning change over at the Sealy School is kind of critical. And when do you think that actual vote would take place?
So we have a public hearing scheduled for August 2nd, before the Zoning Commission. I don't know the number of people that are going to come out around that. I mean, I know before, when the town had entered into an agreement with Kincora about Sealy, we saw a lot of folks showing up at RTM meetings, town council meetings, so I'm expecting a substantial turnout of people at that August 2nd public hearing. Whether the presentations will be finished that night from any public comment, it might be acted upon by the Zoning Commission in September. It could be at their October meeting. So I think one of the recommendations in our memo is to if you do adopt this, to make it effective sometime in the middle of October, so we could still meet August, September, October with the zoning commission and get that action completed, if that's whether they voted up or down.
Yeah, I think you misunderstood my previous question. You said that you had internal work just within your organization.
Yes.
Without the zoning commission or planning and zoning being involved. How long is that?
That might be a couple of months with us working independently with our consultant. So then at that point, we'll have a solid draft of the complete document that we can hand to whichever commission is in place at that point in time, to then start going through that document section by section.
So that might be similar to the Williams Healy, like October timeframe or whatever.
Exactly.
I'd like to make a motion that we make this a combination of the Planning and Zoning Commission with 5 members and 3 alternates effective middle of October. I think that's the middle of October. October 15th.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. I was going to say, you know, we had a lot of people who came out and spoke during the public hearing. And, you know, my inclination was to want to take care of business and combine them as soon as possible and keep things rolling in Groton. But I think that it shouldn't be lost that the people on the zoning and the planning are volunteers, and they have a voice, you know. And if you're not listening to what they say, we may have nobody in planning and zoning, because it is a volunteer position, and we have to be respectful of what the people, what they're saying, and what I'm not saying that we have to go necessarily with everything they're saying, but I don't think it's fair to not listen to what they're saying. What I'm getting from what I'm hearing is that if we eliminate the zoning and make the planning and zoning, then the new planning and zoning would take up the zoning regs. And the work that the zoning commission has already done is somewhat, I'm not sure if it's lost.
There'll have to be some education with the planning commission. The planning commission, although they, as part of their process, review the zoning regulations for consistency with the plan of conservation and development, they're not the ones that are going through it line by line, helping to redraft it.
Yeah.
So there would be some of that would be lost, some of the background work that we've done with the zoning commission over the past year and a half. I don't know if it would be completely lost, but we'd have to make sure we'd had the buy-in from the planning commission on those items.
And if we kept it, you know, if we could be, or if I could be assured or have a good inclination that the work that needs to be done by the existing zoning could be done by the middle of October, or whatever the date is that we choose, then I would be more apt to agree with the proposal. But I just want to make sure that we don't just, that we listen to what people are saying and take into consideration and realize that if it took, you know, if it took till October or took until January, whatever it may be, that we want to, I at least want to make sure that we're serving the town the best, that we're not, you know, and I would, you know, look to you, John, and you, Deb, to give some, you know, what, if you had your druthers, what would yours be? Mark, what do you think? John, if you had an opinion on it, where you're thinking?
I can tell you the zoning commission will not be done with the zoning regulations in October.
Okay.
They might just start their review, and their review is very careful. They're gonna go through it line by line and cross-reference it and make sure it's right for Groton.
Yeah, the only thing that we envision could be done by October is the Sealy School zoning map amendment. So I want to make sure I'm clear with that. The rewriting of the zoning regulations, no matter who does that, that's at least a year.
And so, Bonnie, was there a reason you chose the middle of October?
Yes, because we could get the vote for the Sealy School done by the existing zoning commission, and it wouldn't move into next year, is what John had told me.
I just want to qualify that, because it's a zoning commission initiated application, there are no deadlines for them to take action like there would be with an outside applicant. So I doubt it, but it's possible it could go past October.
Great.
Plus, it sounded like your internal review was gonna take a while anyway. See, they're not ready to go look at this stuff tomorrow.
No.
You just said that, it's gonna be a couple of months, so.
For the larger zoning
Right.
regulations, correct. Just, I want to make sure, because we're talking some apples and some oranges here.
But, so maybe we should query both the planning and zoning, and you give us your timeline when you think this should be implemented based upon people's desires to stay and the workload.
Dean and then Karen.
Yeah, there's no, on the question of what, which is, should we have, shouldn't we have, I know that there are people who've argued that we should maintain them separately. They've either argued that directly or indirectly by questioning the process. But I think the principle of having a combined planning and zoning is sound. I'm in favor of it. The real question is the how, and as the mayor pointed out, the how is the very important part of this. I wouldn't want to derail, given the fact that we have a functioning zoning commission, we have a functioning planning commission. I wouldn't want to derail anything that's going on now by combining them, basically shooting for the ideal. I would like to see that happen. I'd like to see it happen tomorrow, if that was practical. And what I'm hearing is that there are bumps in the road that are really unnecessary to drive over. We can drive around them, to stretch the analogy a little bit, given some time. I'm not satisfied at the moment that we are prepared for this. The members of the bodies, of course, are not entitled to their positions, but as the mayor said, it is a good idea to listen to them. I expect that people who've been doing this for years will say, well, I don't want any more work to do. I'm a volunteer and I do this. I've been on the planning commission or zoning commission, and I have no intention of doing twice as much work. I'm out of here. But at least we should know whether we are going to have a functioning P&Z. I expect, even if everybody hit the road and we had 5 vacant spots and 3 alternates, that we would find people in a town of 40,000 people who want to do that. We would lose some institutional knowledge. We'll figure it out. Just want to make sure we don't unnecessarily, drive in the bad lane as opposed to the good lane.
Karen and then Harry.
Yeah, my biggest concern, I totally support the combination of the two commissions, but I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by making an unrealistic time, or setting up an unrealistic time frame as far as to when, I was more inclined initially going into this to be looking at say a January 1st date for implementation. I'm very reluctant to basically undo work that's been done just for the sake of combining the two commissions. So I would like, what I'd like to do, I think ideally, is for you to have a discussion with the existing planning commission and survey each of the members on it and find out if you can get a commitment. Are you going to stay if this happens, or are you going to resign? Because I think it's important for us to know how many of the existing members are going to stay should when the two commissions combine. How many seats are we going to have to fill? Because I think if they're going to take over the rewrite or the finalizing of the regulations, we've got to have some people with institutional knowledge. And, I think there are too many unknowns at this point.
Harry and then Diane.
Yeah, you guys are the professionals. You know what's going on in the town. This council was to say, we are committed to combining planning and zoning, and we want to make it 5 and 3. That's what we want to do. I would look to you folks to tell us how to best implement that. How long is it going to take? What's in the hopper? What's going on in the town? That's just my opinion. Just throwing out October and say, you guys work with that and do it, just doesn't seem right to me. So I need to hear from you. What do you think we should do? I don't know if we're going to do that. It sounds like we are pretty committed as a council to do it. How do we go about it? What do we do? What do you think, John?
Well, October was actually a date that we had put in here, saying that if you do this, that is the soonest we think you should do it, so that we can get through things that are currently in the pipeline, as well as the Sealy School. We haven't done a thorough check of the existing members to figure out, all right, if you had all 5 current members and the 2 alternates, I think we have 1 vacant alternate right now, if they all resigned, which I don't think that is the plan, but if they did, are you going to be able to fill this new Planning and Zoning Commission within that time period? So I think that's also another factor that's beyond my control. So, I mean, whatever the council does, we'll find a way to make it work.
Diane?
This has been in discussion for a few months now, and I'm really surprised that you haven't asked anybody what their opinion is and if they would stay or go. It is important that we do find out and to listen to them, and I agree with you, Mayor. I totally lost my train of thought.
We have heard
Oh,
from
I
a
know what I
number
was
of
going to ask,
planning-
excuse me,
Sorry.
while I still have it back.
Sure.
What would be the difference for you between October or January 1st? Would that be much helpful? Much more helpful?
I don't know if it would really help us in the larger rewrite of the regulations, because if it was January 1st, then it would just be a delay, because if we knew that there was going to be a joint planning and zoning commission, I guess we could start some of that work with the existing planning commission if we knew that all those members were going to stay. Otherwise, it might just delay things a few months. I don't know how much time it's going to take to set up a new body, or if you had, a mass exodus of members. We have heard from a number of existing members that they were concerned. We didn't feel that it was our place to ask if they were going to resign if this happened. If that's the direction the council wants, we certainly can do that. But I think we've been trying to, we just had the public hearing for this. It's something that we're trying to determine what's the direction, what's the best way to do this.
The commission works for us, so it really is probably our job to go ask. And I wanted to know if you want to recognize Jeff Pritchard, who's the chairman of the planning commission, and ask if he has any
I'm not sure Jeff has asked.
knowledge.
Diane?
I'm just thinking the next step before we move any farther is for you to go and find out what the bodies feel, if they would stay or go, and then we can continue on. But I think it's a fair guess to say that this is the direction that we want to take.
Yeah, I think there's no question that we want to combine the two. I think we also want to make it smart for the town to make sure that there's no, potholes on the road to getting this done. I think to your point, Bonnie, and I think Mark, you were just confirming that the zoning and planning commissions both are a function of the town council, not you guys, although you guys attend all the meetings. So certainly we can go to the next meeting and talk to people, reach out to people and ask them. But we don't have to move on anything tonight.
Okay.
I think we're continuing the discussion, and there's a number of things that we need to find out in moving forward, that we're not going to make any rash decision. Not rash decision, but just a decision today when we don't have to and have all the information. So I would imagine, I certainly can reach out to the planning commission and find out what members are interested in staying. And we can put it on the agenda for a couple of weeks from now, and maybe, and 1 second, John, maybe you guys can, I think to Harry's point, it would be helpful to see a plan, to see dates and what you guys are thinking, so that, and I look to you and to John and to Mark too, but, to see how it's all gonna play out, and make it, the best experience for everybody.
One other question I had is, I guess, what work or would you like to see the zoning commission complete before, so when we start figuring out these dates, is there anything that you want them to finish with? Is it Sealy and their current applications? If that's your goal, then.
Is it the regulations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because those are very different timeframes.
For better or for worse, I would say that I don't know everything that they're working on. So if you wanted to go, you know, if you could help us by telling us the things that they are working on and what their projected rough time estimates
Yes.
are, then maybe we can, it'd be help, you know, we'd be able to better make educated statements about what we think. So would you guys agree with that, or?
Yes, yeah, I just want to
Yeah,
point
go ahead.
out that this is election year, and we are all committed to doing this, so I think we should do it before the election,
Well, okay, so stated.
because it might not happen if we don't do it.
And, I mean, also, you know, I think we can get some of this data together very quickly.
Yeah.
But again, you can always make the decision if you go in that direction and make the effective date out as far out as you'd like.
Yeah.
So if we came back to you and said, all right, well, the zoning commission will be done with the regulations in 18 months, well, you could always make it effective at that point in time. But again, it's, let us get some data for you, looking at the current projects, and some time estimates of when we think those would be complete, so that you can make the best, most informed decision you can.
And if you can let us know, you know, I think that we're relying on you guys a lot. If there's something that you feel the council should be taking it upon themselves, please, you know, let us know, because
Okay.
speaking for me, I don't.
Will do.
Mark, anything you wanted to add before?
No, I think there's really in my mind, two issues, or maybe three. I think having a time frame. I mean, if the intent is to, it sounds like you all want to do this for maybe different reasons, but this is the end game. But you're concerned that it's going to disrupt a work program that's been ongoing with respect to the regulation update. So I think asking John and Deb to kind of put that time frame together makes a lot of sense. I think there would be value in the council reaching out, certainly to the planning commission, if not the zoning commission, to see who, you know, under the future plan scenario, who would be interested in continuing to serve. I mean, it was somewhat interesting that, you know, a number of the planning folks came, a number of the planning commission folks came and raised concerns about the proposal, and that's the agency that would become the combined planning and zoning commission. So maybe probably some of you had follow-up discussions with those individuals, and you may know more than what they actually told you told us at the public hearing as to what their concerns are. Is it just workload?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I guess that's a good problem to have where everybody's busy and with applications and so forth. But I could certainly understand why people are a little bit hesitant of kind of jumping into or getting another responsibility that's already been started by somebody else.
John, in Michigan, is it combined or is it separate?
They're combined in Michigan, and I agree with the tact the council's taking. What I don't know is, do each of the members have a firm idea of what the workload is? They might, you know, be thinking it's more than it, you know, it'd be good to have that dialogue and explain to them exactly what would be entailed in their workload, and see what each of the members of both commissions or committees would have an interest in staying.
Right. So I think we have we'll get it back on the agenda again for more discussion, and we'll come back with more information. And the motion and the second, do we want to postpone, table, postpone, withdraw?
Table it.
Whatever doesn't offend Barbara Tarbox.
Then it would be postponed. Yeah, it would be postponing. All right. Do we have to vote on a postpone? I don't think we do, but I'm going to say we do. All right.
You're right if nobody challenges you.
That's right.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is 2017-0170, request for tax abatement. And at our couple of meetings ago, it was recommended that we are the tax abatement board. Is that right, board? And Councilor Antipas moved that. And we have a tax abatement situation, somebody requesting. And we're going to have a discussion about it now? Or we're gonna?
Yeah, I think the reason we put it on the agenda is for the committee of the whole. You've appointed yourself to play or to carry on this function. We do have an applicant. I handed out to you at the very beginning of the meeting, their application along with a copy of a staff referral memo that Cindy Landry had put together previously and we had distributed to you. I think the only intent of having it on the agenda tonight is for you to pick a date and time specific. We previously talked that you don't want to do this when it's televised. You may not want to do it as part of a regular committee, the whole meeting, maybe a half hour before or something like that. You may want to take a look at some point the information in the application that he has provided, but it's just picking out a couple of dates would be helpful so that we could get a hold of this gentleman and
Yeah,
see
that's
what
what I was gonna say, he has to be here. I mean, that's part of the rules, and why we were so hesitant about doing it back then was is subjecting to somebody to that kind of situation, and it makes absolute sense to have it a special meeting and no TVs and that sort of stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
How about prior to next Tuesday's council meeting on the 18th?
Is there a council meeting on the 18th?
No,
That's Deb's third.
That's the
third
dry
Tuesday.
day.
it's Deb Day.
That's your regular meeting date in lieu of July 4th.
Right.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I take that back, Karen. So we want to do the, so that meeting's at 7:30, right? So we want to do it at 7 o'clock or 6:30 on?
6:30 maybe,
6:30.
given that this is the first application that you've dealt with.
6:30 on, wait a minute, July
18th.
18th, okay. I may not be here the 25th. Let's see.
Right, so whereas we were not meeting before on the 18th because it was Deb Day. Now we are meeting.
Well, we are meeting in lieu of July
Right, for
4th.
this. Okay,
So
very well.
July 18th, 6:30, special meeting, 7:30, town council meeting.
If I could, maybe two things. Nikki, personnel and appointments, did that get changed also from the?
It was canceled completely.
Okay. And I think it would be good if you also picked another date. We don't know what this gentleman's availability is, just in case next Tuesday.
Maybe,
doesn't-
5 o'clock on the 25th?
Have to be a special, I mean, that can be a whole.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. I may not be here that day. I think I'm going to be traveling.
5 o'clock on the 25th? Oh, no, no, if I won't be here. I won't be able to be here at 5.
Welcome to our world, John. So, yeah, all right. Why don't we go with the one in August, the regular town council meeting in August?
There is a personnel meeting that night.
Okay. So that would be,
The first?
August 1st?
Personnel.
Yeah, you can't do it then.
And that's a pretty important meeting, we're talking about, our.
yeah,
rules, so-
okay,
How about the 8th?
of August?
There you go.
Okay.
What time is that meeting?
Committee of the whole at 6.
So say 5:15?
Yeah, that makes Deb happy.
Yeah, 5:15.
So not the 18th.
And I won't.
What's that?
So not the 18th.
No, it's a
No.
backup date.
To back,
If
we're
the
going to give the
18th
gentleman
doesn't
2
work.
dates.
August 8th at what time?
Next week.
5:15.
If the 18th doesn't work. I don't know if I'm gonna be
Way too much.
All right, so discussed? 2017-0173, participation in joint action lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies. And it's funny, when Mark had brought this up, I just read an article about this in, I think it was Fortune, about I think this is right, the drug manufacturers, the distribution of the drugs, like the centers that receive them, and that the amount, and the large amount of them, and so knowingly transferring them to, to drugstores, and they're using large amounts of opioids, and not like, a large amount of pills for every person in town, when something's wrong there. That's kind of it, right?
Yep.
So there's a class action lawsuit?
Yeah, we got notice, attachment 6, we got notice from CCM a little while ago that, they have been made aware that, I want to say it's the town of Thompson, but Waterbury it's Waterbury, wants, certainly they probably do have a very large opiate problem, just about every community does. And there's an attorney that is willing to work with Waterbury pro bono. And so the solicitation is, are there other towns that want to join what would essentially be ultimately kind of a class action lawsuit against Big Pharma on this particular item? I don't have other details at this point. They're really, and they've done this in the past. There have been other issues that CCM has brought to our attention over the years, in which the council sometimes has decided, yes, let's join, and sometimes not. This is the first one where I've seen there's no cost to the town. In other instances, there was a particular issue in which there was a fee assessed to each one of the towns that wanted to join the class action. At this point, what we're being told is this is a pro bono work that this attorney, this Jim Hartley, is taking this on.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Does this have any conflict with Pfizer's?
I really don't know, Rich, at this point.
I don't think it does.
I think that's a good question, though.
I mean,
It's a very
you know,
good question.
here we are, you know, beating the drum, and we have
Yeah.
Pfizer's in town. I think we ought to find out if Pfizer's is a supplier, or we have a conflict with Pfizer's before we do anything.
I don't think Pfizer makes generic drugs, and opiates would be generic drugs. I need to know a lot more about this before I would support anything like this. It's like going after the gun manufacturer because somebody was killed. And I know that's an opiate problem, but you know, once the drug is made, it goes through all different kinds of things in all different kinds of places. So I would have to know a lot more about this before I would throw my hat into the ring supporting.
My sense is that information is available to those communities that at least begin to express an interest. So if there is some interest, we can reach out to CCM and possibly Waterbury to see you know, what further information is available. I think I noted in the agenda report, I mean, this is an item somewhat related to what former Councilor Dela Cruz was raising. I mean, this is, it's not all Oxycontin, and you know, it's very, very much available. I know the mayor serves has served on a task force. I know the chief is very involved, and it's everywhere right now.
I mean, I'd be for getting more information and at least expressing an interest in seeing what it entails, but. Dean?
Pro bono unless it's $1 billion settlement, in which case, right?
Yeah.
We charge no fee unless we collect for you. Yeah, I know that's not exactly pro bono. Is it pro bono, or is it we don't charge a fee until we collect?
All I have is what's in the packet.
Yeah, but that's not actually my real objection. I know everybody can make a living, I suppose. I just have an instinctive objection to things like this policy being made by way of lawsuits. It's great to attack, you know, large industries because they're faceless, nameless. Let's go get them. We know they're going to throw money into a pot, and we'll make it, you know, it's all a win-win-win. It's not. And it probably won't do anything for the problem either. And I will say this, one of my concerns, because I completely understand people who have been victims of this, people who are families of victims of this. I've heard people say, you know, we don't need the painkillers, they should be taken off the market. But there are people in pain and people who need these things. I think we should be very careful how we approach this and not get hysterical again, keeping in mind the pain of the families who suffered the deaths and the suffering of the people who were addicted to this. I'll just put that out there right now. There are ways to do this without running after the witches.
Well said.
Well, to your point, Councilor, I would just say that if there are large amounts of opioids being prescribed that would raise a red flag, I think there's a responsibility to look into that red flag.
Right, prescribed, and who does the prescription?
Doctors.
Agreed.
not the
No,
pharmacists.
but there's a whole chain because the there's distribution centers who are shipping X amount of drugs to a particular town and then to a particular drugstore. And the drugstore may be issuing a particular large amount of opioids. And it's just, my point is that red flags should be looked into, that, you know, I'm not saying that people who need the pain medication shouldn't get it.
In other words,
But-
salesmen, manufacturers, the distributors should be aware, hey, we're selling an awful lot of pain medication in this area. New
Yes.
Bedford, Mass, for example.
Correct.
Something's wrong here.
Yes. And if there's one particular doctor who's prescribing an awful lot of it, absolutely.
Right. No, I'm not saying there isn't a problem.
Yeah.
I am not saying there isn't a problem. What I'm saying is, once you put a label on something, big pharma, well, that's a beautiful target.
Understood.
Yeah.
So we'll get more information, I gather. All right. Next is 2014-0130 non-union terms and conditions. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, everybody.
Have you met John?
I have not met John. Hi, nice to meet you.
Oh, we haven't seen Cindy in a
Enter Bob.
So good evening, everybody. The item on the agenda is non-union terms and conditions, and we wanted to talk with you tonight about two components of that. First, the pay plan slash the salaries. So first, the pay plan itself, and then talk about any potential salary increases. And then second, health insurance. So I'm going to hand out a packet of materials, the first of which just deals with the pay plan issues. Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, is this to be returned? Your vote?
No, we're in open session.
Okay. Still have that.
Hey, no, we're coming down.
Where's the chief still here?
So as you may recall, with our non-union terms and conditions, we have a pay plan in effect that the last year of that pay plan is fiscal year ending 2011. So I think it's fair to say that it might be outdated. And what we've talked about in the past year is to go back and figure out, well, is it outdated? Do we need to do anything to update it? Because the way our system works right now, folks are assigned via level to salary ranges. When people hit the top of those salary ranges, they no longer get the benefit of general wage increases. What they get is the equivalent in a stipend, basically. So their wages don't, their base wage doesn't increase anymore. And I think when we went through the process of hiring the police chief, we looked back and tried to figure out what was the appropriate wage range for that position. And it really wasn't consistent with what we had in a 2011 pay plan. Sort of as a result of that, we undertook to go back and do a complete review of all the non-union positions and the pay plan. And I'm just going to walk you through for a moment how we developed a new proposed pay plan. First, we had to decide or look to a number of communities to view as comparables. And we derived those comparables from looking at the same communities we had used in a police wage survey. And in developing that police wage survey, we looked at location, population, Anglesey ranking, and Anglesey is noted at the bottom of the memo. That's basically a wealth ranking among municipalities in the state, as well as the district reference group, which deals with where folks fit, students fit socioeconomically among the municipalities. So we had looked at that variety of things when developing the communities for the police wage survey. And then in addition, when Tim Ryer was here, who was talking to us about pension issues, he had developed a list of comparables as well for pension purposes. And we also incorporated those communities into the survey as well. So you'll see that in the bold in the middle of that first page is the list of the communities we used to survey to see where we were, where we stood comparatively. Once you undertake a survey like this, it does become difficult because you can have a position, say I'm making it up, assistant HR director. Well, that assistant HR director in Groton might not have the same duties as somebody who's similarly titled in another community, or another community might have HR generalist or something, and they might share the same duties, and you really have to get sort of underneath just some titles to figure out what the duties are to do an apples-to-apples comparison. So as best we could, we contacted various communities, spoke with HR folks, et cetera, to try to be sure that when we were looking at positions, we were trying to line them up as comparably as possible. So that's about comparing apples to apples. Then once we felt that we had fair comparisons or had identified the appropriate positions, we ranked the town. We went through and just ranked, okay, where does the town fit? And whether it was 1 to 7 or 1 to 15, depending on how many communities had the particular position, tried to rank that to get a sense as to where the town stood. And then we developed, we'd say, an average pay. For each position, we, as best we could, might total things up and simply divide by the number of positions that we had to develop an average. We had to walk away from that a little bit in circumstances where perhaps there was a small number of comparables, where we had some compression between one position and another position, or if we felt that the average really didn't reflect the mid-range compensation for similar duties. Again, you might have a job title in one that was the same as ours, but the duties were really, really different. So once we developed an average, then we tried to put together a new pay plan looking at those averages, and how we developed a new pay plan, which is on this sheet. We took the average and went 5% below the average to say this is the minimum starting rate. And we were looking at this again to determine, okay, we want to be competitive with other communities. So we looked at that as the minimum starting rate. We also wanted to have a maximum starting rate to put some endpoint on that. And we did a 15% spread. So we went from the minimum, added 15% to get a maximum starting rate, figuring that we would have a pretty broad ability then to hire people based on what their credentials, ability, et cetera, were. In our prior pay plan, we only had that one range, and we didn't have any consistency in terms of the percentages between the start and end point. So we were trying to bring in some consistency here. And then because we've had this situation like we have now, where understandably the pay plan doesn't get modified over a period of time, you have people who have already bumped up against the end. We put an extra 10% range to say the maximum rate period. So those, you wouldn't just have this 15% spread, you'd also recognize that you could have some people who have been here long-term, or you may have hired somebody higher in the range, that they would still have a way to go. And the pay plan would still be in effect and valid. So that was the methodology that we used, and as a result of that methodology, you can see what the positions are, the proposed entry rate, maximum salary rate, and also there's a line that says proposed rate for incumbent. For every position that's there, other than the positions that are in yellow, we didn't modify the wages that the position had right now, that the incumbent had. That's a subject for continued discussion, I think, tonight about whether or not there might be some general wage increases or things of that nature. The positions that are in yellow, however, and the reasons that they're in yellow are that the incumbent currently makes less than what we have listed for the proposed minimum entry rate. And our suggestion is that those folks should be brought up, if this pay plan is adopted, to the proposed at least minimum entry rate. I know that's a lot of information sort of take in, and I can pause there for a moment and answer some questions about methodology and things like that if people do have questions. But I do feel that, we did as comprehensive a job as we could do in terms of trying to track down information about other communities and really trying to put it into an apples-to-apples comparison.
Karen?
Okay, I have to think of how I want to say this. I think there's two positions here that you have highlighted in yellow. And I understand why you're focused on those. What I guess I don't understand is, I'll be very blunt. I did not realize, when I first started looking into this, how the wage structures worked here in Groton for non-union. In Ledyard, and that's because that's where I'm familiar, we redid the wage scale for all non-union positions. That was done every year. And all of our non-union department heads and everything got raises every single year, unless there was a wage freeze. So, and basically, it was pretty consistent with whatever we were giving non-union. And the thought being that if you're going to be giving union people raises and you've got department heads frozen, then at some point the parity closes up between the employees, the union employees that the supervisors are supervising. When I looked at the budgets, I would see every year 2% increase, like on different line items. I thought those were raises. And so I never said anything because I was like, well, okay, I agree that I think a 2% is fair. And it wasn't until I got approached by someone from the police department who said, I haven't had a raise in 6 years. My wage has not increased in 6 years. And I said, that's not right. I see right in the budget. Your line item went up 2%. And then I found out when I started checking that that was a, as you said, a stipend, because that individual was at top step and had been at top step for the last 6 years. And keep in mind that when they're at top step, and I understand now there's 10 people who are currently at top step, their salary for pension benefits doesn't increase year after year after year. They're at maybe towards the end of their career, and all of a sudden they hit that wall where you've gone to the top of the step scale, and then your salary gets frozen, and the only thing you get after that is a bonus, a cost of living, whatever you want to call it. But that doesn't count towards your pension earnings. So your pension gets frozen at top step. Meanwhile, we've been raising the police department, we've been raising the sergeants and the lieutenants' pay to try to get them up to where they should be and make those positions more attractive as far as getting the rank and file to apply for those positions. And we've been creating increases, 2% and 3% increases, and yet you've got the captain who's sitting frozen and is now in a position literally where a lieutenant who can use $10,000 of earnings towards his pension calculation is going to get more money when he retires than the captain will, because he's only allowed to get, I think it's 4,000 or 6,000. You know, I had to hear somewhere, I think it's 20,000 for the rank and file, and it's 6,000, 4,000, 3,000.
So I think one of the things that this is trying to do is to address a situation where, to ensure that people won't bump up against that point, understanding that it might not be every year. And this isn't designed to be an every year thing where you have to modify this pay plan. This is saying we have wage ranges, and we're making the ranges now broad enough, hopefully so that we won't run into those situations in the future. And if you scroll down to where the captain is on this, I think you'll see that the wage range proposed for that position, as reflected in the surveys, et cetera, would provide that position with much broader growth. But some of it, as well as a product of the fact that, our non-union terms and conditions spell out that the raises are governed or maybe applied by anywhere from 2.5 to 4%. In some years, based on merit. In some years, there have been across-the-board general wage increases, and that might be something that you'll look at again right now, given the timing, et cetera, and things like that. But I think, Karen, it may be that your situation in Ledyard may have been different because you were looking always at general wage increases, a set amount across the board, and some of these are merit-based. Not saying right, wrong, just saying that might be a difference in it. But hopefully, if we go to a system like this that provides a more expansive wage range, we at least won't run into that situation of people bumping up against the end. And I think, if you go through this and you see that the vast majority of the positions, their salary rates now will fall within these new ranges, then it's a separate discussion about whether or not, that the council wishes to propose or pass a general wage increase for either years 16, 17. There was no general wage increase provided for non-union. 17, 18, there's not been a general wage increase provided for non-union. So I think that's something in addition to consider. And as we talk a little bit more, and you'll see in your packet, there is a wage, an internal wage survey so that you can see the percentage wage increases of union and non-union folks, which I think goes through some of what you've described as well. So as we move on with this, just something to keep in mind with regard to the general wage increases, roughly 1% of the non-union wages payroll is roughly $35,000. So 2% is roughly $70,000. We just calculated that with HR today, just so you're aware of that. But I think that's a two-step process. One, I think I would certainly recommend adopting a new pay plan and hopefully a new pay structure. Happy to answer questions about this that you might have. And then, number two, to consider the general wage increase component of it, because in certain circumstances, all your union folks received at least 2% wage increases in 16, 17. And those who are not in negotiations have at least a 2% wage increase in 17, 18.
I just don't want us to get into a position where we risk losing our department heads and some of our really valuable employees, especially you get them trained, they're doing a good job, and then when they hit top step, if there's no place else for them to go, and all they're looking at is, bonuses or something, I'm really concerned that they may decide, especially if they're young enough, they may decide, hey, I can go somewhere else and make more money and get a better retirement. So I just don't want to set up artificial limits that are going to hurt us.
Harry?
Thanks for your hard work. I understand most of it, which is remarkable, I suppose. What you're looking for tonight is, and I like the broader ranges too. I mean, that's what I'm kind of used to out in the private world. What you're looking for us is buy-in on this new schedule for all these good folks. We're not talking about raises here tonight. I mean, that's something I'm sure is going to come up, but that's not where we're at.
I think you can. I think the two are, somewhat tied together. But so that's why I wanted to at least give you a little bit of background on what's 1%, what's 2%, and as I talked to you about,
the health insurance is on here too.
Right. So as I talked to you about
tonight, I mean that's something we haven't even talked about yet. So
right, which I'll hand out a few more documents on, and that will dovetail, I think, into the discussion about wage increases as well, for consideration. So why don't I share this, and then you can see some other numbers as well.
While you're handing those out, it feels like we're kind of looking at almost like a union. When we're looking at negotiations, we look at the plus and the minus. What we're giving up, what we're getting.
Do you support that? I assume that you would want to know
absolutely
what the pluses and minuses are of it. And in this packet, there are just a couple of pages from the non-union terms and conditions. Just one, that indicates that the council has a right to modify the non-union terms and conditions. Second is a policy statement. It says that it's a policy of the town of Groton, and this goes to, I think, what Karen's comments were, that the terms and conditions of employment for non-union employees shall be comparable to or exceed those of unionized professional and supervisory employees. And then I've included the health insurance portion, which outlines what the current health insurance plan is for non-union employees. So you can see the plan design there, as well as the percentage contribution. Just a reminder, these folks never had those caps that we talked about in prior union discussions and negotiations. So their 10% has been a true 10%. As you know, through our discussions with on union negotiations, we are in the process of moving folks from the PPO plans to the high deductible health plans. You just ratified an agreement with the GMEA group, your largest group in town, that will move that group from the PPO plan to the high deductible health plan. Over the course of the last couple of months, Bob in Human Resources and some folks from the Health Insurance Consulting Group have come down to speak with the non-union folks to present to them the high deductible health plan as well, and to explain to them what it's about, what it entails. And you know, as we look at things today, and yes, Bruce, I think it is sort of a give and a take, and that's why I wanted to mention the issues about the general wage increases, that, you know, we're looking, I think, from a financial standpoint, to move these folks as well to the high deductible health plan. And you can look at the bottom of just this sheet for a moment. It's the second sheet in your package. That just describes, again, what the high deductible health plan is. And at the bottom of it, it outlines what the monthly rates are for the PPO plan for the non-union folks is now, and what the high deductible health plan would be the cost. I think you can see there's a pretty significant difference in those amounts. So then on the last page of your packet, and this is something that probably should seem familiar to you because I've shared something like this with you before, again, when we've talked about union negotiations, going through and identifying what the cost of health insurance is right now for our non-union folks. And our non-union folks have the ability to choose both either the PPO plan or the high deductible health plan. And looking at the current makeup, the cost of health insurance per annum is $976,922. If everybody was moved to the high deductible health plan, that would be reduced fairly significantly on a per annum basis down to $695,862. Because we're already into the fiscal year a bit. If you were to go ahead and modify the terms and conditions for non-union members to have them participate on a mandatory basis in the high deductible health plan, and they started likely in September, I've just outlined what I think the difference is in the cost of the health insurance. So, and again, you know, you're self-insured, it's all claims-based, so it's not gonna be a perfect system with these numbers, but that's where we'd be. And so I shared that figure with you, as well as talking to you a little bit about what the raise percentages would come to if we looked at that and said 1% is this, 2% is that. You know, kind of, again, yes, the same types of information that I've shared with you before when we've been talking about union contracts.
So these seem to be reasonably done, but we all, as a council, I think we're pretty committed to going to non-pension retirements, and I'd like to know what the impact of these two things would be on that.
You know, these two things do not deal right now with non-union pensions. The reason why I'm halting for a minute is I actually have to go back and look at the non-union pension plan to see if it has the same language in it that the pension plan for some of the unionized folks have, which indicate that it follows the actives. I apologize, I just don't remember off the top of my head. If it follows the actives, then that has a direct correlation with this. You know, these are things that truthfully are done in steps, and this is the thing, I think, the first and foremost that it's important to address now. Certainly addressing the pension issue, looking at it for both non-union and union folks. Yes, I appreciate your sort of angst or desire to get to that. I do think there's just kind of a method, and we have to look at this first. But I can certainly get back to you as to whether or not the non-union pension plan terms and conditions references that they follow the actives as well.
Yeah, I just don't want to approve something that's going to make it more difficult to change our.
This will make it more difficult to change the pension issue, because this is, or help me out, I'm not quite sure I'm
Well,
following.
I just, the way they're, I just want to make sure that we can still be streamlining towards what our goal is.
Sure, so you have the authority with the non-union terms and conditions to make changes to those non-union terms and conditions. And for the moment, I focused on these couple of issues because I think they're the most pressing and urgent. And for the high deductible health plan, the more time that goes by, the less savings, you'll have in the immediate. So that's somewhat of a more pressing issue, as well as the issue with the pay plan that needs to be updated. But I appreciate what you're saying, and that doesn't impact your ability to go back in.
Something that no one we're going to take away.
No, you're not giving up an ability to go back and look at the pension issues.
Greg? Where are we at with the pension discussion that we've had, that you were going to go
Yep.
off and look at the numbers and do, I think, a similar survey that you did here?
Right, no, I appreciate that we're not there yet with it. I
Where-
can't tell you that I have it in my hand because I don't. Honestly, my focus has been on getting the union issues addressed and getting to this point with these folks. We truly have to go back and have Tim come back and address that with everybody again. With the, I think as I've mentioned, with our pension plans are composed of both the pension and retiree health insurance. And the changes that have been made with retiree health insurance alone have been pretty significant just by virtue of the contractual changes. For example, with GMEA now, those folks are going to have to move to a high deductible health plan as retirees, which will have a significant economic impact for the town.
So he's not working on that project that we talked about?
Is he working on it?
Yeah.
Can I tell you that he's got something right in progress? No, I don't want to tell you that. Do we have to get back in touch with him? Yep, we'll get back in touch with him, and we have to coordinate a time for him to come down.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Diane?
I think what I'm hearing from you is that you have a finish line that you want to get to first with this other stuff before you approach the pension issue. Is that true? Because we have brought this up for the last 18 months quite often, every time we see you, that
Yep.
this is the goal that we're looking for.
Right, and there are certain interim things that have to happen. I mean, we have contracts that we're negotiating and that we're wrapping up, and then we have separate pension negotiations that we have to get into and go forward with. And the pension negotiations themselves, again, depend in part on the direction that you'll be providing us after the input from Tim Ryer as to what type of plan we're pursuing. Is it basically a defined pension plan, a defined contribution plan? Is it some hybrid plan? What is it that we're going to be putting on the table? And I understand that the goal is to make changes to that. In the interim, the steps that have been taken are saving the town money now.
I understand.
Before we get there.
So that's the finish line that you're looking for?
Right.
Is to get to that point.
Right.
When is that going to be, do you think? So when can we start on what we want to start on, and that's the pension?
With the pension negotiations, I mean, I think it's, the sooner we have Tim come down, the better. Because once we have him come down and review again and make a decision on where we want to go with it, then we'd be inviting the unions in and starting negotiations. It wouldn't be, I wouldn't get you very far if I started negotiations now without a clear game plan or strategy in effect, or without the ability to say, this is going to save the town X. This is why we want Y. So I'm sorry I'm not giving you a straight answer as to it will be next month or 2 months from now. I don't want to set it up.
I just know that we sat down with him once before and listened to what, he had to say.
Yep.
But our opinion is, we want to go with this.
I appreciate that.
And I believe when he was talking to us, he was trying to sway us into a different direction.
Truthfully, my experiences with Tim have been that he's trying to provide you with as much information as you can possibly have so that you can make the decision. And it's showing the good and the bad and saying, hey, this is a positive, this is a negative, this might wind up here, this might wind up there. Some of the things that I found, just personally, when going through the processes with him, were that, oh, I didn't know, like, just surprising things to me that I want to be sure as well that you're aware of. Whatever you choose to direct for us to do, that's fine. My goal with Tim is to be sure that you have accurate and adequate information on which to base your decision.
Okay, so can we bring him in soon? Can we?
Yeah,
sit-
we'll contact. Yep.
Thank you.
We'll contact him.
Yeah, I'd like him here by August, for sure.
Bye.
I think
do our best.
Mark and I have had several conversations about getting him in, and it's been a time issue. I think there was issues with his schedule. He was away, and particularly in the last month, trying to get him in. And then we got so close to the transition of John to Mark that it, so I would anticipate it's gonna happen sooner rather than later, Bonnie.
Okay,
So,
great. That's terrific.
Did you have something?
Sorry, just wanted to put my 2 cents in. On the non-union pay plan, the simple question I have is this: it doesn't matter what the organization is, public, private. There's work to be done. There are people to do the work. You want people. You need to be competitive, otherwise you'll be constantly in training mode. We've seen this before with other departments. You train people, they leave as soon as they realize there's a better opportunity elsewhere. Does this proposal render us competitive? Does it keep our morale? Does it keep people doing what they're supposed to be doing on behalf of the town?
I believe it
sounds like a very
renders-
simplistic question, but
No, I mean, I believe it does render us competitive because of the methodology that we used in deriving averages and then ensuring that we had enough room above the averages, both for hire and for growth. I do feel that it'll render us competitive or even more competitive than we've been.
yeah, 'cause I'm not interested in training people just so they can go off to East Lyme or something.
Right.
All due respect to
Right.
East Lyme.
Yeah.
Rich?
How long is the scale gonna last?
It can, I'll say it can last as long as you would like it to last, although we could put a time frame on it. We could say 3 years, we could say 5 years. It's certainly not gauged, not designed to be 1 year and having to go through this every year. So I would say 3 to 5 years, because there should be enough room in these ranges to allow the movement to happen.
Okay, 3 to 5.
Bonnie?
So these 4 positions, the Deputy Chief of Police, Director, Human Resources, Risk Management, the Foreman Transfer Station, and the Coordinator, Risk and Management, if we approve this, they will get a promotion,
A raise.
a raise.
I think that's, I'd suggest that that be a twofold vote.
Okay.
This is just identifying those, and the proposal is that, yes, if those folks are below the minimum rate, then I think it warrants bringing those folks up to the rate, but I think you can vote on them separately.
Mark?
Just a couple of things. I think Eileen and Bob and Eileen's staff have done a great job. When you look at our existing pay plan, which expired in 2011, every year was a different sheet. And, how this would work from a department head standpoint is, you have a vacancy and you have the ability to start somebody somewhere between the column that's column 1 and then column 2. And that's where you kind of get a sense of, geez, how come we didn't get a lot of applicants, or how come we got so many applicants? But then it does provide the ability to really address Karen's comments and concerns for that employee to be able to, grow in the position, so to speak. The last time we did this was 2007, and we used an outside consultant. Harry may remember David Dunn. I have to say, I think there was a lot of discussion, a lot of talk amongst staff and Eileen, because as she noted, some of these positions are not, really generic. You find out that every community has the titles may be the same, but in fact they have different responsibilities. So we've tried to address that. historically, I mean, one of the reasons you do a pay plan is to make sure, you know, if you've got folks that are under the minimum or over the maximum, that you make adjustments. I mean, this would be, you know, not addressing those 4 positions in yellow would be like doing a revaluation but not changing anybody's value on their house if their current value is higher or lower than what the reval. So handling it in 2 separate steps, I think is perfectly fine, but I certainly would encourage the council to consider seriously adopting this new non-union pay plan, and also favorably acting upon those positions that are below the start.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the vote on the proposed non-union wage range plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Sorry, just one item with that. I think we need to put an effective date on it. Just make it effective whatever date, and if there were to be any changes to individuals' pay rates, to indicate whether or not that would be retroactive
Do you
to a
have a
particular date.
recommendation?
I think it would make sense to go with a fiscal year for the range, so I'd say July 1, 2017.
Okay, I'll modify my motion to July 2017 fiscal year.
So you want to make a revision to your, amend your motion?
Yeah, that's what I just did.
All right. Is there a second for that?
Second.
So we have a motion to amend the first motion by adding
An effective date?
effective date, thank you. July 1st. Diane?
Now, are you supporting everything, even with bumping up the 4 yellow spots?
No.
Because
We're going to do that separately.
Separately,
Okay, because I can support this, but
yeah.
not the other, okay.
Before we vote, I just have one of the things I need to figure out, I guess, I have in my mind. I completely respect and understand the salary survey and what you've done and where people fall into, and it looks like for the most part, we're doing okay. But I'm wondering if there's other parts of the story that we don't know. As an example, how many vacation days do non-union get? How many sick days do they get? What's the payout policy for vacation and sick? All the things that do have dollar signs in front of them, but aren't necessarily right in front of us. So I'm making this up. If they may be, we may be 3% lower on average on salary, but if you look at, you know, the payout policy of X, it makes up for it and more. And so I just want to make sure, I want to support this. I just want to make sure that there's not things that we don't know about that would make me change my mind.
Right. I don't think that there's anything extraordinary in the communities that we looked at that would jump out at things. I mean, we had started looking at some of those policies when we were looking at non-union terms and conditions more broadly. But I think what you wind up finding is things are pretty similar. You might have a blip here or a blip there. Now that's setting aside the pension issue, which we're looking at separately and going to compare everybody separately. But in terms of the actual benefits, I don't think you're going to find something that really, you know, stands out like a red flag.
So for the non-union employees, is the accrual of sick and vacation time the same?
Can I tell you that it's exactly the same? No, I would be
I mean
remiss
employee
tell
to
you.
employee under non-union.
Employee to employee.
So the non-union employees fall under one umbrella.
Oh, yes, yes.
Right, non-union employees, right?
Right.
And so they all have the same policy.
Correct.
Right, all their, so
Yes.
what is their, so for ex-employee, what's the vacation, how many days do they accrue in a year? And what's the payout at year's end? And
Sure.
and what can they get paid out at the end of their, when they retire?
Yeah, for the moment, I'd have to look it up, but I do have that package of the benefit comparison that I've shared that compares the non-union folks to all the union folks and outlines that. If for example, on vacation,
Do you mean from town to town? Because she got this
you mean
from town to
you
town.
just mean here?
I mean here.
Here, okay.
I guess my,
Right.
I don't want to make
So-
it confusing, but.
Folks get less than 9 years. Folks accrue 1 1/4 days a month. Beginning of 10th year to 15th year, 1.5 days. Beginning 15th year and thereafter, they get 2 days. And then
So
there's
for 9 years and under, they get a day and a half?
day
you
and a
said?
quarter.
Day and a quarter
so-
per month?
Mhm.
So that's
15
15 days, right?
Plus, there's this, which is in the contracts as well, an additional 2 days of quote casual leave, which is really what some people might characterize as personal
personal days, yeah.
leave.
And then what about sick?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Sick days?
Sick days, 1.25 per month.
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
across the
1.25
board.
per month. And what's the payout policy? If I don't use any of my sick days in a given year?
In a given year, if you don't use all your sick leave, if you have in excess of 250 days, then it's converted to pay in the ratio of 3 sick days being equivalent to 1 day's pay. When we've analyzed this, because it had been in some union contracts, you know, there are some folks who get it, but this typically does not wind up being a huge nut.
Mhm.
But there's a separate, there's separate provisions with regard to payouts where you have to have at least a minimum of 100 days or more accumulated sick leave, then you're eligible either for a payout or a conversion to, into your pension. So those types of, I guess what I'm saying, which is these types of things, they're pretty similar. I mean, certainly one community might have a 2 days to
Yeah.
one payout or something like that, but
right.
I don't, I
mean, I
wouldn't
guess
expect-
and I've said this before, I come from, I work at Foxwoods. My paycheck has hours of sick time and hours of vacation, not days.
Mhm.
I don't deal in, so when we're talking about, in excess of 250 days, and I'm looking at my paycheck and I have, let's say, 220 hours that's
Right.
accrued.
I
It just
guess-
is a different mentality.
Yeah, well, I guess you can look at it in a different way too. If you're earning up to 15 days a year for sick leave, right?
Yeah.
To get to 250 days, what is that? It's 15 years? How many, I'm
I don't
not
know,
sure how many
yeah.
years, 20
Yeah.
years? But that's an incredible amount. You can look at it from that perspective. It's an incredible amount of service time without taking any sick time.
Right,
to
but
be able to
and
get to that
I
point.
don't want to be a dead horse, but 15 days is sick time a year, 15 days of vacation time a year, and 2 personal days is a lot. It's a lot of time.
Understood. Yep.
I mean, so that's, that's a little bit different than the private. Bob, is that true or false? I mean, you can confirm that.
Certainly would be a lot different than private, yeah.
Yeah.
You could look at me, it's a lot different in the
Yeah.
private sector too.
So, is that how it was, John? And, I mean, is that similar, the structure similar to how it is in
Yes.
Michigan? Okay. I'm done. That's it. We have a motion and a second
Should have been a
to,
government employee.
huh? We have a motion and a second to amend the proposal.
Make a motion.
No, it's already done. It's already done.
Second.
So all those in favor of amending, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8 to 0 to 0. Now we'll vote on the amended. All those in favor of accepting this proposed non-union wage range, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8 to 0 to 0. And then we want to have discussion about the 4 employees who fall below the proposed minimum. Anybody? Karen?
I think we should use the recommended figures that are in there. I don't know why you would single out 4 individuals simply because were they because they're below?
Yes.
Okay.
If you look, actually, on the second column from the left, it says existing incumbent salary rate.
Mhm.
So if you look down to Deputy Chief of Police, it's listed as 98,500. And our survey came up with the minimum rate of 98,616. So for that position, it would be an increase of $116.
You're right, okay.
So then the same thing, if you look at Director of Human Resources, the amount is there. It's roughly $2,200. So just the existing rate compared to what the minimum rate is.
Right, I just think, basically they're highlighted because they fall below, and she's given us the range that exists now based on the communities that she surveyed. So I don't know why we wouldn't include those people.
Are they relatively junior people, though?
One's the deputy chief.
Relatively new hire, correct? The deputy chief has been with us a year, I'm not sure. About a year. Your director of human resources has been here for four years. I do not have the data on
But we're looking at
the other
6,000 here.
the other two, the foreman transfer station or employee benefits coordinator, because we weren't looking at, as somebody, we weren't looking at people, we were looking at positions, what they do, and comparing them elsewhere. So.
Right. I guess part of the picture that we don't know, and I'm sure you guys understand, are there any performance issues with some of these? I mean, the two on the back page get a higher percentage increase in their pay. I assume they're good employees and.
Truthfully, I don't know who those employees are. What we looked at was the positions.
Right.
So I can't tell you that I know who those employees are, or it kind of would render this not objective, I think, if that was a piece of it.
Dean, I'm sorry, Dean and Rich.
Okay. Yeah, I see where they're in yellow, I see where they fall, sometimes just a little bit. In one case, I think up to $6,000, a $6,000 difference. It's not that we're cutting anybody's pay. I mean, I would like to leave it to the supervisors based on what Greg said. Performance, do they merit it? I mean, they've been given room to grow. I don't see the adoption of the plan as an automatic, as a license. Here you go, here's $6,000. The person may deserve $6,000 and more, I don't know. I would leave it up to the supervisor, whoever it is that determines the pay. Now we have new ranges. Hey, if they're entitled to another $6,000, now is the time. They've been waiting all this time. That's great. They've been against a ceiling of some sort. But I would go case by case rather than just blanket and bring everybody up.
Well, the determination of pay and any type of, and I don't view this as it's
too much.
This is an equitable issue, I'd say, as opposed to this person's doing great, this person's not doing great. But in terms of the non-union terms and conditions, and Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's a 2.5% to 4% range that an individual can receive as a merit increase, and that's really not what this is. That's not what this is about. The merit increase would be, I'm making this up, the deputy chief, you change the range to 98,616, and now he comes up for his evaluation, and under our non-union terms and conditions, you say, oh, guess what? We're going to slot him, the chief is going to propose that he's going to get again, making it up, 4% wage increase because he's done a great job. That's where that comes into it. I think we'd be mixing apples and oranges to say now, okay, put this back into the hands of a supervisor to evaluate merit.
Yeah, my point is we've identified four positions that after the statistical analysis wind up falling either just below or in one case very far below what we've determined is a minimum range. Again, without regard to the actual people working, this is not with regard to them. If we're going to say, well, let's just bring everybody up, somebody's going to get a nice raise. That may cause morale issues. I'm not taking anything away from them. I think it should be left, rather than voting on basically a large raise here, just leave it up to management to determine whether or not that's appropriate, rather than simply bring everybody in the line just to bring everybody in the line because it's aesthetic.
So Rich and then Harry. And then
Yeah, I agree with Greg. It should be performance. Some of these are substantial raises, and I think that the individual may not warrant that type of a raise for the performance that the person does. So I think the supervisor that should look at this and make the judgment, not us. And we have to remember, I don't think we heard from the governor yet as to how much money the town is going to really be hit for.
No, we haven't.
So I think we ought to consider that too, about giving raises, because we may be giving ourselves a big raise too. Go right out of here, if you please.
Harry?
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree. You've all just voted on a salary range for all these good folks, and 4 of them don't fall in those salary ranges, and I feel as if they should. It ends up being $11,685.
That's right.
I don't know how you can tell people this is the salary range you're supposed to be working in, and say, oh, by the way, we're gonna let your boss decide whether you're gonna really fit into our salary range. So I totally disagree.
Diane?
Okay, I agree with Dean. I think raising the cap is enough incentive that they will get there and they're not gonna be stopped in 10 years or whatever. They're still gonna get raises for many, many years, so I have to go with Dean.
Just just so you're aware of the process, which was what I mentioned to Dean, 7.4 of the non-union terms and conditions provides that non-union employees are eligible for annual pay increases of between 2.5 and 4% on their classification date. The percentage increase shall be reflective of the employee's job performance in accordance with guidelines established by the town manager. Now, those were all done in our prior wage range. You had the range, and then the town manager would make a proposal of X, Y, or Z, and that came off of the range, not the range being based on that amount. Am I describing it accurately, Mark, if you want to jump in with this?
Well, maybe just, you know, we kind of fell off the wagon with the non-union folks quite a while ago, as you can tell from the wage history. You know, we didn't do anything in fiscal year 17, 18 is, or 16 and 17, and 18 is to be determined. You can see that in a number of years, it was 2%, it wasn't 2.5%. We don't really use the scale that's in the non-union terms and conditions because of budget constraints. There have been years where the council has not authorized increases. There have been years where the manager has not recommended increases also. So it's been a long time since we've used the provision that Eileen has mentioned where, you know, if you're acceptable, you're doing a good job, or you're a superstar, you could get some variation on a percentage increase. We for the last couple of years, when there have been increases given, if somebody's satisfactory or above, they have gotten 2%. And so, you know, that provision that's in there really has not been used over the last couple of years, and the council's been aware of that. It's something that comes up at budget time, and other instances where we've talked about or updating the pay plan. You know, I do think, I know some of the, or at least one of the increases is fairly significant, but that's what the salary survey is telling us. You know, so what are we telling those individuals? That, you know, we're basically saying, you're here and we're taking advantage of you. That's how I would interpret it if I was one of these individuals. I think one of the things from a mechanic standpoint we haven't gotten there yet is, you know, if there is going to be an increase for either last year or for the current year, is to have that get applied to the current salaries and then adopt or then consider upping those 4 individuals that are in yellow, so that it's not 1% or 2% on top of the adjusted salary, which would even make it a larger increase.
Bonnie?
I think I agree with Harry. You know, if we're adopting this as a salary range, but I do think that Greg has a good point. I mean, if this is a problem employee or something, I think we should table this until another meeting and have the supervisors get back to us on that.
Will you table it?
Greg and then Karen?
One thing too we might ask is, was there any trouble with finding enough comparables for those 2 items? I mean, maybe the data wasn't as good because it is kind of odd that only you had 4 highlighted out of the whole bunch. And there's not a lot of transfer stations around, so maybe that could be part of the issue.
I don't want to stop you from talking. I can listen and look.
I mean, it just could be a matter of statistics, you know, in your data gathering.
If I might.
Isn't to her point, because Karen was next, but if.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I have to, never mind. I guess I give it up.
I've got to make sure here that I'm following along with this. We just made a motion and passed acceptance of this salary schedule and this salary range. All 4 of these positions that we're now talking about are included in something we've already passed.
No, we decided that those weren't in the first vote.
That's not what our vote, that's.
Yeah, it was.
It said accept these 4 positions?
Yeah, we accepted.
No, we accepted it as a range, but we weren't going to vote on them being brought up to it in the vote. They're gonna do it as a separate vote.
All right,
And the attorney recommended we do it that way.
okay.
I mean, there's certainly not an issue with HR director, deputy chief of police, with employee benefits coordinator. There were actually 6 comparables. I'm just trying to locate the last one here.
Well, I made a suggestion that we do that.
And with the foreman transfer station, there were 4 comparables.
Mark?
I think maybe just another point, I mean, once again, looking at the wage history, you know, if you go back to fiscal year 10, there was no increase. There was no increase in 11. There were increases in the next 4 years, and then there haven't been any increases in the current and the prior 2 years. So I think some of, you know, let's assume people were getting maybe 2% per year. These salaries for these folks that are marked in yellow would be higher. You know, and the gap between them falling below what the salary survey is telling us and where, you know, where they are would be significant. It would either, I think 3 of them would probably fall off and 1 of them would still have an issue of a couple of percent. So I think you need to take that into account, or at least be aware that that may be what's driving for some of these positions, not to be getting increases for 5 out of the last 8, 9 years.
Hold on. Diane, did you want to say something?
No.
Dean, and then Rich.
I'm always uncomfortable because even though we talk about these positions anonymously, when you talk about a specific position, you know, we can always tie it in, and I just want to make sure people understand. We're not talking about specific people. I am trying to keep, I think we all are trying to keep it in the abstract. So once again, this is not a reflection on anybody's performance, their worth. Some people are worth their weight in gold, we know that. I can see both arguments. I'm coming at it from the point of view of no one's getting a raise. This is not an approval of a raise of any sort. We're modernizing the structure. No one's getting a raise. But it could be that 4 people will get a modest to a very large raise. And my concern is morale. It may not be understood the way we see it when we bring them into line. Somebody will say, hey, how come you got a 10% raise? I didn't get a 10% raise. We're also basically saying, well, yesterday your relative pay was fair. You were okay with it. And now today you're not, because we've adopted something on paper based on and it's our policy. What I was thinking of was we adopt the policy, and these positions, if they fall under the minimum, would grow into it at some point, at the discretion of, you know, as necessary as we either have a new hire or performance, et cetera. Unless, Eileen, you're saying that the charter dictates that we must, well, not the charter, but our contract basically dictates that we must bring these folks into line, these positions.
No, I think it's that the concept suggests that you bring folks into line, because if we're adopting a pay plan and we're saying that we've identified a minimum rate, minimum entry rate, and maximum salary rate, and now certain positions that we have fall below those, it's more a sense of, equity issues, and it's a sense of, like we've done in contractual situations where we've said, hey, wait a minute, we did this survey, these folks fall below the marketplace, we're going to do a wage adjustment. That's what these are. These are wage adjustments for these positions, to say, we recognize that, that this is not what the market bears, what our current rate of pay is, and so we're going to do a wage adjustment for these positions, which is completely not related, not performance-based or anything like that. So for example, when we brought some other contracts, to the fore and said, whether it was police a couple of terms ago, where we said we need to do some wage adjustments, we weren't looking at saying, hey, Sergeant X, did you do a good job? No, we were saying equity across the board says this is what the job sort of warrants, and we have to do our own good job about if people aren't performing well, aren't performing up to par, we have to address that with them. That should be ongoing now. If any of these positions, if the people in any of these positions were having performance issues or what have you, Mark would know about it by now.
Rich and then Bonnie. Rich, did you want to?
Well, I was just looking at two of the people, the employees that are marked in yellow are fairly new.
Okay.
One has been here for roughly a year, and the difference here is $500, I think. No, $100, $120. The other person in the position has been here for 4 years. And I think, as Mark mentioned, if you look at the fact that we have had zeros, if there were, say, 2% wage increases in each of those years, this wouldn't be a issue or question.
Bonnie?
I have a question about that, because the range for all of these, existing wage range, is well above what the salaries are on all 4 of those jobs. So
But
why
It's
wouldn't
not-
they have gotten a percentage?
Well,
They're not, they didn't hit the cap.
there's only an increase if the council grants an increase each year. So in the past, so for
But
16.
they wouldn't be different than anybody else. If it was a 2% raise, they would have got it.
Correct.
Right,
And
correct.
everybody else would have gotten it too, but
And they would have been
a
bumped
number
then
of these
into a-
yellow ones would no longer be yellow if there had been increases over the last couple of years. If the position that's $116 below what we're proposing
Right.
had
But
gotten a 2% increase,
But
we
the-
wouldn't be talking about that.
Yeah, that's true. But
You
the
know,
2 on
last
the back
year or
page
whatever.
wouldn't have gotten up to that.
But in the back page, if I could, in the back, it would be a significantly smaller adjustment than what the salary survey is
Right.
calling out right now.
Greg?
I mean, it does seem like a small percentage, when you look at it in the whole, there's small percentage of folks that we were out of bounds with as far as
Because
the
your
salary range goes.
your
like you're
payroll
warming
is
up a little
roughly
bit.
3.4 million.
Now, what's been our experience in the past, the last time we did this? Do you remember, did we have similar issues?
Ooh, gosh, back in 2007?
We did, and I think we actually may have had 1 or 2 people that were over, that were grandfathered. I can't remember if that was 2007 or
That was 10 years ago.
the salary survey before that, actually.
Right.
Diane?
Can you tell me what towns you used?
Is it right there?
Sure, those are all listed on the,
It is
Front
on?
page, yeah.
so in the communities that we developed by looking at who we had selected for the police wage survey, which involved a combination of population, location, Anglesey ranking, DRG, as well as taking the communities that Tim Ryer had used as comparables and talking about pension issues.
That's the one you just had, right? It's the one in your
What, this one?
notes?
Oh, okay, thank you.
So I understand, I do understand what some of the counselors are saying, that when you're looking at it from just a strictly corrective standpoint,
that it's a no-brainer, you know, we need to get everybody on the same page and get the 4 corrected. From Councilor Antip's, his standpoint, I get it. I mean, if I'm an employee who has been here, you know, X number of years, 15 years, and somebody who's been here a shorter amount of time is getting a substantial increase, it could have something to do with morale. I get that too, but I don't think that one supersedes the other. And the only thing I'm you know, that I'm looking at is what Richard said, and you know, it's every dollar counts, and it's difficult from a budget perspective. And I think that when we're doing the when we're looking at each year, looking at giving non-union raises, and we're looking at it at budget time, which is probably a terrible time to look at it, and we end up making decisions based upon budgetary as opposed to what people deserve. I think that for the $11,000 that we're talking about here, it's probably we owe it to the employees, and we owe it to correct things, to put that money in, and then hopefully not go through this again for several more years. But you know, I think it sounds like there's a bunch of different.
With me?
I am agreeing with you. Different opinions. So.
Can I offer one objection?
Yeah.
I would object to the characterization of the existing pay. If you're going to bring these folks into line, these positions into line, I would object to the characterization of the existing pay as incorrect.
Is that what I said? Did I say that?
Well, you want to correct their pay. I don't want to use that. We're using a lot of terminology very
All right.
loosely, but I'm going to be very careful. If we want to move them from pay A to pay B, let's do that. But I don't want to refer to pay A as wrong, incorrect, unfair, inequitable. It just so happens the pay was fine before we looked at this.
Duly noted. Diane?
So if we vote this in, these people that are getting $4,000 or $6,000, when are they eligible for a raise again?
Like everybody else.
I think that's sort of up to you.
When's the
Because
last time they did get a raise?
the last raise was in 2015-16 fiscal year. There have not been raises for 16, 17, 17, 18 yet. So that's another component of the discussion, you know, if there were going to be a general wage increase or not for non-union
So
folks.
some of them would get kicked in, right? If you did a 2.5% wage increase, the person who's $116 lower would most
Right.
likely be corrected.
Right, if they had that previously, sure.
Yeah. Does anybody want to not make a motion? Anybody want to?
I think we're gonna wait for Greg, no?
Oh, we could go.
Harry?
I'll move that we appropriate the 11,000, whatever the number was I said, to put those people in line to where they should be after passing the salary schedule, $11,685.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there more discussion on this? We want to wait till for Greg or Colm or C or?
Depends on whether it's going to be close or
I
not.
think it's going to be close.
I think it is, so I think you
I
should.
think we owe it to wait a second. Thanks, Matt.
You ever watch 1776, the musical?
Hmm.
They call Second Call Rhode Island. He's outside and unnecessary.
We can actually hear him if you open the door.
Cloistered hush.
We'll discuss it in the
Sure.
Mark, where would the money come from, if we appropriated it?
Right now, my recommendation would be that the departments would, it's beginning of the fiscal year, we would challenge the departments to find the money within their existing appropriation.
Okay.
What about the money tree?
Bob's like, never mind, forget it.
One in the back, huh? We should get one of those.
Here he comes. So Greg, we have a motion and a second to pass the 4 increases to get them in line with the proposed minimum entry rate.
All right.
And we're waiting for you till we have a vote.
Thank you.
So all those in favor of giving the 4 people the increase, raise your hand, please. Opposed? So that passes 5-3.
I guess I'd suggest that there are then two more items for consideration. One is whether or not you wanted to consider the issue of any type of general wage increase, whether it be for 16-17 or 17-18, as we're addressing the salary schedule, and as tied into what I've outlined with regard to the high deductible health plan and the adoption of that for the non-union folks. And again, I just shared with you the cost impact of adopting the high deductible health plan, and sort of the offset of a 1% raise would be approximately $35,000, and a 2% raise is approximately $70,000. Again, this is one that it
And the
just
savings in a year of the high deductible is 218, is that?
roughly, that's what I estimate, provided that the plan can get put into place by September 1. There's a little bit of a lag time to put it in place, but that's when I would estimate it could be put in place. So that's sort
Yeah.
of the best data, we could give you on that.
So, does everybody understand what the?
No, I don't.
Okay, so we're looking at.
Whether we're gonna give them a pay raise for
Yeah.
2016, 2017?
Well, any pay raise, you could make it for the fiscal year starting July 1st, you could make it retroactive to last year, there's a lot of ways you can go.
I don't think we should be talking about any pay raises until we find out what the budget is from the state, personally.
Okay. Anybody else?
But I'd be happy to talk about the healthcare issue.
So theoretically, can we talk about, we can move on.
Theoretically, sure, you can discuss it. I just, again, refer you to the non-union terms and conditions, which, as a policy, this is the council's policy. In recognition of the level of responsibilities and additional work and effort routinely required of non-union employees, it is a policy of the town of Groton that the terms and conditions of employment for non-union employees shall be comparable to or exceed those of unionized professional and supervisory employees. So I share that in the context of saying, is there a give and take with anything? But it's really your call as to how you want to proceed. You have authority under the non-union terms and conditions.
Karen?
Yeah, I understand that we've got a situation, a monetary situation, and we don't know what the governor's gonna do. However, we as a council approved all of the contracts for all of the unions that have come up before us, giving all those people 2% raises. And so I am personally hard pressed to say, but I'm not gonna do the same for the non-union. If the unionized employees are deserving of contracts that give them 2% over the next couple of years, I don't see how we can say, but the supervisors who supervise those employees, we're gonna make them wait and decide what we're gonna do. I think that's wrong. So I think we should, at least for the current fiscal year, actually, we're behind a year. We just passed a budget for 17, ending in 18. So you're talking about last year. At the very least, I think we should pass one for the current year, even if you just want to hold and do nothing for the year that closed. That's the very least, but I think, we need to act on it.
Diane?
I agree with Councilor Morton, yet, having said that, I really think we should table it until we find out what the governor's doing with the budget and see what kind of crunch we are in.
Rich?
I'd like to table a motion. Make a motion to table it.
We can always retroactive it, right? If we're not gonna get lambasted like it appears we
Yeah.
are.
I agree. I'd like to table it, because I agree with Karen. I do think in principle we should be giving them a raise. But if we get cut to 14 million or whatever, it's gonna, we should know in a month, in a few weeks, hopefully.
To Councilor Morton's point, is it appropriate to make their just one faction of employees, those who are non-union, beholden to what happens in Hartford and everybody else, the other 200 employees, are rewarded for being in a union. And so, you know, I understand the yin and the yang of the decision being made, but I don't think that they should be, you know, penalized because they're not in a union. I don't think, I would propose I would not go retro to 2016. I would propose a 2.5% increase effective July 1st, 2017, and put, you know, and go to the high deductible healthcare plan, which would be still a net savings of, I think that's 2.5% would be, don't tell me, 87.5 and 87,500, and the savings in the first year would be 219,000, give or take, right?
In those numbers.
Around there. So we're still peeling off $100 and some odd thousand from expenses. So that's my motion.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second.
Who seconded?
Harry
Oh,
did.
I couldn't hear.
Harry whispered it.
Mark?
So I just want to make sure, so are you trying to cover the 2.5% increase plus the high deductible health in the same motion?
Yes.
Okay.
2.5% wage increase effective July 1st, 2017, and going to the high deductible health plan. Bonnie?
What did the unions get? 2.5% or 2? Thought they got 2.
The unions for 17-18 have received so far 2%. However, they also received increases in 16-17, which the non-union did not. So the union received at least 2% wage increases in 16-17.
And telecommunicators, looks like they got 3%.
Right, because they led the way in terms of health insurance.
Karen?
I'm going to see you and do you one better. I would like to amend, I'd like to make a motion to amend your motion. I'd like to offer them a 4% increase and the high deductible plan.
Is there a second to the amended motion? No second to the amended motion. So we're at the original, Harry?
I have one question, because before we talked about, or Mark had mentioned any raise that we might put on to be like, so I'll just use an example. Let's see, we're picking on the Deputy Chief of Police here. I'll go to the Director of Human Services Risk Management. That 2.5% would be applied to the 95,817, not the, I'm sorry, it would be applied to 93,636. Is that what you were saying before, Mark?
That's what I was suggesting before.
Yeah, so, because I'm just remembering that from our discussion before, the 2.5% would be applied to the sub-level salary and not the new one that we just passed.
I think that's your decision, however you would like that.
That's what our town manager was suggesting.
I was only raising the issue to really address the fact that one or two of the yellow highlighted ones were fairly high, and that, you know, if they had been getting increases, it would be significantly.
So we'll buy that, and so I would interpret the motion that the mayor made to be on top of the yellow number. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I asked that a half hour ago. If we gave them a raise, is it on top of the proposed
the new.
or the old?
Yeah, I just was getting clarification, that's all.
No, I'm glad you did.
Could you clarify again, Harry?
The raise is on top of the yellow numbers.
No, that's, the yellow's the new number, it'd be the other number.
I don't care what it is, to be honest with you. It's not very much, but I just want to make sure it's clear in our motion, that's all.
It should be.
Not clear.
It was
should
my,
be an existing.
I was under the impression that we voted in the four increases, and then we went to a 2.5% raise that would be on top of the yellow number. That's how I interpreted it, but that's, again, we're talking about, you know, I don't know, $6,000. I mean, you know, we're spending a large amount of time on.
2% of $11,000.
Yeah. So, Dean.
So the impact, the non-union salary nut is what?
The payroll is 3.4 and change, so I roughed 1% to be $35,000, 2% $70,000, and then 87.5 for
Right.
2.5%.
Okay. Now, I didn't care so much about the $11,000. That was not with the four positions before. That was really
Okay.
neither here nor there. But that combined with this, now it's $100,000 of money we don't have. That I would like to throw out there. I have in the past resisted calls. People have said, well, just because the unions are getting money doesn't mean that everybody else ought to get money. And I'm thinking, if you keep that up, at some point, everybody here is going to wind up unionizing or leaving. I got that. The atmosphere I have is kind of a festival atmosphere. Sure, 2%, 2.5%, 4%, like we have it. Why wasn't this part of our budget discussion before? Now it is. I mean, this is a big payroll issue. And the unions, the other distinction I'd like to make is, yeah, we do come to agreements with the bargaining units, but also understand that there are different pressures there. And I don't want to punish or leave aside the non-union people because they happen to be non-union. But there are pressures there. It's settle, come to an agreement, or else go to arbitration and see where that gets you, kind of thing. It's not the kind of thing that we face with the non-union employees. At the same time, I don't want to, abuse the privilege. So I'm sort of torn on this one. No, I'm sorry, I don't have a finishing thought.
Bonnie?
I'm going to try this again. I'd like to table this issue. So we have some more money, information from the state.
0.
Do I have a
We wouldn't
second?
table it, we would
I'd like to
postpone
table
it.
too.
Postpone it. Second it. Second it.
Postpone it. Second.
So we have a motion and a second to postpone. Is there any other discussion on this? All those in favor?
Well, I think if we talk to your motion, I mean, it's a gain in the town's purse, I believe.
Mhm.
Because you're putting the two together, the wage increase and the high deductible. So,
Yeah, it's a combined, it's two things in one. There's things I like and things I don't like. No, I just remain a little confused. This is obviously altogether, we're talking about close to $100,000. It's something we would have talked about at budget time.
We're gonna lose John. All right, so we have a motion to postpone and a second. All those in favor of postponing, raise your hand. Opposed to postponing? That fails 4-4. The motion on the floor is a 2.5% increase effective July 1st, 2017, along with putting into effect the high deductible health insurance plan. Yes, Diane?
I'd like to put another offer on the table. Can I do that?
You want to amend the?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
And put 2% on, not 2.5, and that the raises are for the 4 yellow people on the existing rate, salary.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Mark?
If you do that, you're still going to end up with a position or two that's below what the salary survey is suggesting.
Right.
So you
No,
wanna-
because in essence, what would happen is they wouldn't really get the raise. They're getting their 4,000, 6,000 or whatever,
but they're not gonna get the 2%, because by bumping them up, it's much more than 2%.
If I follow correctly, for example, the position on the back page, it has a $6,000 difference.
Right.
I think you're saying, apply the 2% to the existing wage rate, but
Yep.
then you still have to make up that other amount. So the person is going to get the $6,000 bump, but they're not going to get 6,000 plus 2%.
Exactly, that's
Okay,
exactly what I
that's-
meant. That's what I said.
I'm sorry.
Greg?
But aren't they gonna get 2% of their current? Aren't they gonna get 2%?
They're gonna get more than 2%. They're gonna get 2% on their old salary and a lot more because we increased the wages.
That'll be for two positions.
Two people will get probably 5%.
Two positions, right, under that theory.
Can we specify exactly which positions we're talking about?
Yeah, they're the 4 positions in yellow.
Well, there's one that's only $100.
Right, so
I
there's
mean, it's
three,
not-
there's 3 positions.
Yeah,
3 positions.
so which 3?
I'd say I would do the same, all 4 get treated the same.
No.
You're basically, what you're looking at is there are 4 positions that have fallen below. Let's say 3 of the positions, if they got the 2% raise, that is, or 2.5% raise that's being proposed, they would come inside the minimum. And they would not, and so you're looking at giving them a raise to get them to the minimum, as opposed to giving them the minimum and then giving them a raise. You're looking at, the difference in money is negligible. I mean, we're talking, Harry thought it was $220.
Yeah, I think
you know,
it's around
it's negligible.
$300.
So to sit here and
It's
debate
11,000,
the merits of doing it before or after,
But the difference between 2 and 2.5% is large,
it's $17,500.
that we don't have.
So, John?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding, sorry. I used to have a microphone. Just want to make sure I'm understanding. If we went back to the July 1st, 2017 retroactive, so you'd have, let's say you did the 2%, so you'd add 75,000 that goes back, then you'd automatically then have a 75,000 increase for 18, and then if you do another 10%, another 2%, you'd have another 75,000 added in, so you're talking 225,000. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we're looking at an increase
Just
effective
starting
July
at
1st, 2017, so we're not going to go back to 2016. So,
But for the upcoming year, for what you're budgeting for the 18-19, that would be the effect, though. I mean, for what you're going to adopt. I mean, you will then basically, by the end of 19, the effect is 225,000.
What was the total?
It won't be, this isn't adopting an increase for each year, it's adopting an increase, it's year by year.
Okay.
So it's just for, I think Bruce is
So they won't
saying.
get one for the 1 year and then another.
Correct.
2.5
No,
years.
that the council would have to vote on that
Okay.
separately,
Okay.
unlike a union contract, that's for a period of time.
Dean?
So the operating principle, as we've understood it, is to shadow. Not necessarily to copy, but to shadow, to keep the peace, to maintain satisfaction, and so on, and to be fair. So it is up to us year by year to say 2% or nothing, 2%, 1%, 0.5%, 2.5%, whatever it is. And you're right, it doesn't have to be for the 18-19 budget. But the arguments we're making now about shadowing will also apply then. So let's just be honest, are we prepared in 18-19 to say, no, we're not going to raise it 2%? I know we raised it 2% the year before. We're not going to raise it 2% this year. But your union buddies will be getting 2.5%. What will be our argument then?
I don't know, what will be our argument then?
I don't know.
So we have a motion on the floor to amend my proposal.
What did you say it was gonna go up? What was that figure?
Well, now, so if it's 2% for last year, which would carry forward, not giving more, but that is a permanent salary then, correct? So it would carry forward.
Right.
So you're talking 150,000 for 2 years, essentially, for 2%, if you count last year's budget, and then upcoming over the next year,
I think Bruce's proposal isn't to go back to last year, it's for this year,
for the 18-19 upcoming.
for the current.
Yeah, I'm saying though, if you
17-18.
pay retro for the last year, and then you're not gonna, so you're not at all.
To this July.
Just this month ago. Okay, that's what I'm confused with, yeah.
All right, so we have Diane's amendment to my motion, which is a 2% increase, and giving it on top of the minimum, the salary they were receiving prior to bringing them into the minimum. So the 4 people who were, everybody, I want to make sure everyone understands, the 4 people who were, their increase would only take place if they were still outside of the minimum after the 2% raise was given. Okay?
Yes.
All those in favor of amending my motion to that, you got that, Nikki?
Yes.
Okay, raise your hand. Opposed?
Abstention.
Abstention. Oh. Okay, that fails. 3 to 4.
I'm agnostic.
Okay.
I would like to make an amendment.
Okay.
I'd like to make amendment to do 2% for the same period of time that you suggested, and only go back to the existing incumbent rate for the foreman transfer station and the employee benefits coordinator.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to something I don't understand. So, what was your?
To go back to the existing wage rate promote for 2% to those 2 jobs on the second page only.
So in other words, the other 2 people would
Move on.
move
Okay.
forward and get their 2%.
Okay. All those in favor of that amended motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? That fails 3 to 4 to 1. The proposal, what's on the floor right now is a 2.5% increase, right, for effective July 1st, 2017, and putting into effect the the high deductible insurance.
I have a question for Bob's again. I can hear the sighs, don't worry. In a nutshell, would the proposed raise, so to speak, keep the peace, keep morale in place, keep the wheels greased? Does it, because that's what I really want. I don't want, I'm not just looking to screw people, I'm just trying to figure out, where's the money gonna come from? But if this is something that's really bordering on the necessary, you tell me.
Well, it's a daily conversation amongst all these non-union employees that they feel they've been discriminated against, basically. I don't mean that in the form of, a EEOC claim, but they feel that they've been left behind.
So this is not a hypothetical, this isn't academic,
Constantly
this is for
asking,
real.
what's gonna happen with the salary survey? Where is it? Because initially, the council had told us to put together a salary survey. So it was public that we were putting together a salary survey, and what are we doing with the salary survey? Oh geez, it came out wrong because it's favoring the employees. I mean, that's what you come down to. Now, if you go with the high deductible health plan, managing those plans for everybody that has one, it's, it costs you more money. So where's the raise if you just go the high deductible health plan and you don't have any compensation to at least trade off at some point? I think that's a problem.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of the proposal on the floor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That passes 6 to 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience. I know that was a long go around. Thank you.
So we move to 2017-0005, pending litigation, potential executive session. I believe Matt is here to update us on.
This executive session?
Yeah, I think it is going to be executive.
Before Matt starts, Nikki, the motion that you got with all the amendments, did it address the percentage increase, and did it address the high deductible health?
Yes.
I know that was the intent, I just want to make sure.
2.5% increase effective July 1st, 2017, and implementation of the high deductible health plan.
And include the yellow numbers.
So this is a relatively quick executive session? Okay. Thank you. So I hereby move that the members of the Town Council Committee of the Whole, together with Town Manager Mark Oefinger, John Burt, Finance Director Cindy Landry, Tax Assessor Mary Gardner, and Town Attorney Matthew Auger, go into executive session pursuant to General Statutes 1-206B for the purpose of discussing pending tax appeal litigation brought on behalf of Groton Law Enforcement Association and on behalf of Pfizer. I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion here? Rich, you're staying for this?
Unless you want me to leave.
Well, I
I
mean,
mean, if I leave, would you freely talk better, or, you know, am I holding you up?
Your presence will not, no disrespect intended.
Yeah.
Your presence will not influence what I say, either
Okay.
way.
All right. So
all right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8-0 to 0. Okay, we're back from executive session. There's a consideration of committee referral items that are recommended for deletion. Anybody want to move those items?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to delete 3 items. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 8-0 to 0. I do have one thing I have to, we need to appoint somebody to the Thames River Innovation Place Board, and they're meeting on Thursday. They've received the money from the state, a grant, and they're working towards spending the money and getting Innovation Place together. And Paige Bronk has been instrumental. He's been part of the regular meetings, and I wanted to get the council's okay for me to put forth Paige as a board member representing Groton. Everybody okay with that?
Absolutely.
Good choice.
Okay, super. I guess we're coming down. Barbara's here, which is very, very nice. Mark, I guess we're almost adjourned. And yeah, anything you'd like to say before?
Well, I do, I do want to thank the current council and past council and RTM members and everybody that volunteers in local government in Groton for all of your hard work and commitment to the community. And in particular, I want to thank you all for your support and assistance to me and town staff throughout the years during my 15 years tenure as town manager, but also, you know, I had another career before I fell asleep at the switch, I guess, and agreed to become town manager. And that was, you know, I spent close to 20 years working in the planning department. And you know, it's been pretty exciting the last 15 years, but it was also very exciting in the planning department. There was a lot of good things going on in the community. There were some not so good things going on. There was a lot of growth, but there was also a couple of economic downturns. I mean, I can remember a couple years after I first started in Groton, we were dealing, you know, we were borrowing money at 12 and 13%. In the early 80s, and people were getting mortgages that were 15, 16, and 17%. So we've been through a lot, but I think it's fair to say Groton's pretty resilient. We have, I say this at budget time, and I know some people are like, yeah. We're a very fortunate community. You know, I think one of our biggest challenges going forward is to make sure we don't do damage to ourselves as a community. We despite what's going on in Hartford, you know, I think, you know, I'm convinced we will come through it. And we need to take advantage of our good fortune when we have good fortune, to better position ourselves as a community. And I still think Groton is the best community in southeastern Connecticut, if not the state of Connecticut. And so I want to thank you all. I know, you know, I've always looked at my job to try to provide the council with the best input and advice. Despite what either some of you think or some of the folks you talk to, you don't work for the town manager. The town manager works for you. But my expectation has always been that I would have the opportunity to share whatever knowledge I might have with you, but ultimately, it is your decision, what direction you want to take the community. I would encourage you, John's going to do a great job, but he's not coming here as town manager with 20 years of experience of working in this community. So I would encourage you not only to give him a good long honeymoon, but to also don't assume he knows everything, and don't assume that he doesn't know anything. But I think the way you engage the new manager, probably needs to be different than the way you've engaged me, because he's going to need help from everybody. He's going to need help, and I don't mean that the way it sounds, John, but that in order to help learn the community, all of you are from different parts of the community. You all have a very different perspective sometimes from each other, but also the department heads and town staff are going to have to show him the same courtesy in order for all of us to be successful going forward. So once again, thank you. It is very bittersweet. Most days, I love my job. It's a great community. I have no desire to be town manager anyplace else, but I'm sure I will end up someplace else doing something else, either full-time or part-time, and there's not too many folks that can say that they've had a great 35-year career. So thank you. I would be remiss. I'm not giving away any of my, well, I probably am giving away some of my comments from my going away shindig, and I have to, once again, I need to publicly apologize to Nikki because I have not been a good patient at all. If her original plans were allowed to have happened, my going away gig would have been March 17th. That's how long she's been trying to cajole me into having a going away gig. But I could not have done what I've been able to do in planning and economic development and in the town manager's office without Nikki's assistance. She's been rock solid. So thank you all.
Thank you. And Mark, I think that, as we said when we started the meeting, that I know more is going to be said, but that the community is a lot better off, and beyond words, with you having been in it and having led it for the last 15 years. So you're right. There's highs and lows, but I think there's more highs and lows, and I think that that your professionalism, your passion for the community, the way that you lead, the way that you deal with people, the respect that you have, and the respect that you're given, says a lot about Groton. So thank you, and hopefully you'll stay in Groton.
We plan on staying
and,
right here.
Anybody is
You've made our jobs easy. It's been so much with your guidance and the leadership that you've shown to all the councils as they've come and gone. I think you've been really instrumental in making it easier for us to do our jobs, and I thank you for that, Mark.
All right, everybody good? All right. Do you want to move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned. Congratulations, Mark. This is it.
Thank you.